Perhaps you lie here tonight and your mind will not stop. Perhaps thoughts race like trains through a station at 3 in the morning, each one demanding your attention, pulling you further from the sleep you desperately need. Maybe you have tried counting, tried breathing deeply, tried everything the internet suggests, and still the thoughts come faster and faster until you feel like you are drowning in your own mind. Tonight we explore a different path. Through ancient Buddhist wisdom spanning Japanese mountains, Chinese monasteries, Korean hermitages, and Tibetan caves, you will discover something more powerful than trying to stop your thoughts. You will learn how to remain peaceful while thoughts continue, how to be the sky instead of the storm. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you are listening from tonight. Through 8 profound stories from across Buddhist Asia, each one a complete journey lasting 18 to 25 minutes. You will meet monks and farmers, students and masters, all of whom struggled with racing thoughts and found freedom not through control but through acceptance. These are not brief parables but full narratives rich with detail, deep with wisdom, gentle as moonlight on still water. Let your breathing soften now. Feel each exhale carrying away whatever tightness you have been holding in your chest, your jaw, your shoulders. Notice how your body already knows how to let go, how to settle, how to rest. You do not need to make this happen. Simply allow it. If you are here carrying the weight of a mind that will not quiet, if you have spent hours tonight already trying to wrestle your thoughts into submission, if you feel exhausted from the constant mental noise, you are not alone. These teachings have held millions through similar struggles across 25 centuries. They offer not solutions, but companionship. Not answers, but understanding. These stories come from wisdom traditions as old as mountains, tested by countless generations, proven by time itself. From the meditation halls of 9th century Japan to the cave hermitages of medieval Tibet, from the working monasteries of Tang Dynasty China to the mountain retreats of Joseon, Korea, seekers discovered the same profound truth. The thoughts are not the problem. Your relationship with thoughts is where freedom lives. Let your whole body sink now into whatever supports you. The mattress rises to meet your weight. The pillow holds your head without effort. The blanket rests against your skin with gentle pressure. You are held here completely. There is nowhere else you need to be. Nothing you need to figure out. No problem requiring your attention right now. Rest in this darkness. Let yourself be cradled by silence. Tonight, you are safe. Tonight, you can stop trying. These ancient voices will carry you from this moment into deep, restorative sleep while planting seeds of wisdom that will change how you meet your mind. In the mountains of 9th century Japan, there lived a young monk named Daichi, whose mind moved so quickly that even his teacher could not keep pace with him in conversation. Daichi had entered the monastery at 15, fleeing from a merchant family in Kyoto where his father imported silk from China and his mother managed a household of 7 servants. They had raised him to take over the family business, teaching him to calculate profits in his head, to remember the names and preferences of hundreds of customers, to track inventory across 3 warehouses simultaneously. His mind had been an asset in that world. Sharp, quick, relentlessly efficient. But something had happened to Daichi in his 14th year that shattered every plan his parents had woven for him. He had been walking through the marketplace on an autumn afternoon, his arms full of fabric, samples his father wanted him to study, when he passed an old beggar sitting against a temple wall. The beggar was not doing anything remarkable. He sat perfectly still, his weathered hands resting in his lap, his eyes soft and clear as mountain pools. Daichi had seen thousands of beggars. The streets of Kyoto teemed with them. But something about this one stopped him mid-stride. The man radiated a quality Daichi had never encountered in his busy, ambitious, endlessly striving family. Complete stillness. Not the stillness of sleep or exhaustion, but alert, awake presence. The beggar noticed Daichi staring and smiled slightly. Then he spoke 3 words that followed Daichi home, disturbed his sleep, made every silk bolt his father showed him seem like painted dreams on cheap paper. Who are you? Not what do you want? Not can you spare some coins? Who are you? The question burrowed into Daichi like a seed finding soil. Who was he? The son of a silk merchant, a future businessman, someone who could calculate faster than his classmates, remember more than his siblings, work longer than anyone his age. These were things he did, not who he was. The distinction had never occurred to him before, and once it appeared, he could not make it disappear. 3 months later, to his parents' horror and grief, Daichi shaved his head and entered Rinzai Monastery in the mountains north of the city. His mother wept. His father disowned him. His siblings called him crazy. But Daichi felt he had no choice. That simple question, "Who are you?" had revealed a void at the center of his existence that all his accomplishments and plans could never fill. The problem was that monastic life did not slow his mind down. If anything, the silence and stillness of the monastery made the racing thoughts more obvious, more intrusive, more exhausting. In the merchant household, there had always been noise, activity, problems demanding immediate attention. His racing mind had places to go, tasks to accomplish. But in the meditation hall, sitting still on his cushion, while his teacher rang the bell and incense smoke spiraled upward through shafts of morning light, Daichi discovered that his mind was like a wild horse that had never been broken, never been taught to walk calmly, only to run. Thoughts poured through him in torrents. Memories of his family, worries about whether he had made the right choice, plans for how he would practice, how he would improve, how he would finally achieve the peace he sought. Judgments about other monks who seemed calmer than him, fantasies about becoming a great teacher someday, analysis of every teaching he heard, every sutra he read, every word his master spoke. The thoughts came so fast and so relentlessly that by the end of each meditation period, Daichi felt more exhausted than he had after a full day working in his father's warehouses. His teacher was a woman named Myozen, which meant wondrous Zen, and she lived up to her name in ways that baffled Daichi completely. She was perhaps 50 years old, though she moved with the ease of someone decades younger. Her face carried deep laugh lines around her eyes and mouth. She spoke rarely, but when she did, every word felt necessary, stripped of decoration, landing with peculiar weight. Most remarkably, she seemed to exist in a state of relaxed alertness that Daichi could not imagine achieving. She could sit in meditation for hours without moving. She could work in the garden, chop vegetables, sweep floors, teach students, all with the same quality of complete presence to what she was doing. One evening, after the day's final meditation, Daichi approached her in the garden where she was watering newly planted herbs. The sun had set, and twilight painted everything in shades of blue and purple. Crickets sang from the grass. The smell of wet earth rose around them. "Teacher," Daichi said, his voice tight with frustration, "I have been here 6 months and my mind has not slowed down at all. Every meditation period feels like torture. Thousands of thoughts every minute. I cannot make them stop. I try to focus on my breath, but within seconds my mind is somewhere else. And by the time I notice, it has already traveled through 10 different topics. I feel like I am failing at the most basic practice. Maybe I am not suited for this path. Mayazen continued her watering, moving from plant to plant with unhurried attention. When she finished, she set down her wooden bucket and sat on a nearby stone bench. She gestured for Daichi to join her. "Tell me," she said, "when you were working in your father's business and your mind moved quickly through calculations and negotiations, did you judge yourself for thinking quickly?" "No," Daichi admitted. "That was my job. The faster I could think, the better I performed." So speed was not a problem there. It was an asset. Yes, exactly. Then what makes speed a problem here? Daichi opened his mouth to answer, but found himself without words. What did make it a problem? In the merchant world, his quick mind had been praised, rewarded, cultivated. Here in the monastery, he experienced it as an obstacle, a failing, something shameful. "I think," he said slowly, "because here I am supposed to be calm, peaceful, still, and I am not." "Who told you that you are supposed to be calm?" Mayazen asked gently. "Everyone. The teachings say to quiet the mind, to achieve inner peace. But my mind is not quiet. It never has been." Mayazen looked at him for a long moment, her expression compassionate. "Daichi, do you see that stream?" She pointed to a small creek that ran along the edge of the garden, its water catching the last light of day. "Yes." "Is the water moving or still?" "Moving, of course." "And is that a problem? Does the creek need to stop flowing to be acceptable?" "No, that is what water does. It flows." "Exactly." Mayazen picked up a leaf that had fallen on the bench beside her. She held it up between them. "This leaf is dry. Does it need to be green to be a proper leaf? Does it need to be on a tree instead of in my hand?" Daichi felt something shift in his chest. "No. It is simply being what it is in this moment." "Yes. And your mind, Daichi, is simply being what it is. A mind that moves quickly. A mind that generates many thoughts. This is not a failing. This is not an obstacle. This is simply the mind you have been given to work with." "But then how do I find peace if my mind is always like this?" "Peace is not found by changing your mind into something it is not," Mayazen said. "Peace is found by changing your relationship with your mind. Right now, you are at war with your thoughts. You judge them, resist them, try to make them stop. This war is what creates your suffering, not the thoughts themselves." She set the leaf down gently. "Think of it this way. Imagine you are standing in a busy market. Hundreds of people passing by, talking, laughing, arguing, selling their wares. If you stand there trying to make everyone be quiet, trying to control what each person says and does, you will exhaust yourself completely and fail. But if you simply stand there and let the market be a market, let people pass by without needing to engage with each one, what happens? The noise continues," Daichi said, "but I am not exhausted by it." "Precisely. Your thoughts are like people in a marketplace. They will come and go. Some loud, some quiet. Some pleasant, some unpleasant. Your practice is not to control them or stop them. Your practice is to let them pass without needing to engage with every single one. You are not your thoughts, Daichi. You are the awareness that notices thoughts. But how do I do that? How do I just watch them without getting caught up in them? You practice, Myozen said simply. Every time you sit down to meditate and a thought arises, you practice noticing it without following it. This thought says, remember what your father said the day you left. And instead of diving into that memory, reliving every painful detail, you simply note, memory thought, and return to your breath. Not with violence or frustration, with the gentleness you would use to guide a child who has wandered off the path. Oh, you went that way. Let's come back here. She stood up, brushing her robes. The thoughts will not stop coming, but gradually, over time, you will notice something change. Not the thoughts themselves, but your relationship with them. You will find that you can remain peaceful even while thoughts continue. You will discover that the stillness you seek is not the stillness of a mind with no thoughts. It is the stillness of awareness that remains unmoved, regardless of how many thoughts arise. Like the sky, Daichi said slowly, a glimmer of understanding breaking through. The sky does not change when clouds pass through it. Exactly like the sky, Myozen smiled. You are the sky, Daichi. Your thoughts are merely clouds. And clouds, as you know, are always moving. That is their nature. Let them move. She bowed slightly and walked toward the main hall, leaving Daichi sitting on the bench as darkness settled fully over the garden. He sat there for a long time, watching his thoughts arise and pass. Arise and pass. Like visitors in a marketplace, he no longer felt responsible for managing. For the first time since arriving at the monastery, a sense of spaciousness opened in his chest. Not because his thoughts had stopped. They hadn't. But because he was beginning to understand that he didn't need them to. This story illuminates one of the most liberating insights in all of Buddhist teaching. Your racing thoughts are not the enemy. They are not a sign that you are broken or failing at inner peace. They are simply the natural activity of a mind. And some minds generate more thoughts than others, just as some rivers flow faster than others. The problem is never the thoughts themselves. The problem is your relationship with them. Your belief that you must control them. Your exhaustion from constant battle with your own mind. Think about this for a moment. When you lie awake at night with racing thoughts, what creates more distress? The thoughts themselves, or your frustration with having them, the actual content of your worries, or your judgment that you should not be worrying, the swift movement of your mind, or your desperate wish that it would slow down. Most of our suffering comes not from the first arrow, the actual experience of racing thoughts, but from the second arrow, our resistance to that experience, our belief that it should be different than it is. Consider someone driving in heavy traffic. The traffic is the first arrow. It is stressful, yes, but manageable. The real suffering begins when they start thinking, this traffic should not be here. Why does this always happen to me? I am going to be late, and everyone will judge me. I should have left earlier. I am so stupid for taking this route. The traffic has not changed, but the person's experience of it has multiplied exponentially through mental commentary, through resistance. Through the second arrow, they shoot into themselves. Your racing thoughts work the same way. The thoughts themselves are the first arrow. They arise because you have a lively, creative, sensitive mind that notices many things, considers many possibilities, generates many ideas. This is not a defect. It is simply your mind's particular way of operating. But then you shoot the second arrow. My mind should not be like this. I should be calmer by now. What is wrong with me? Why cannot I just relax? Everyone else seems able to quiet their minds. I am probably doing this wrong. Maybe I am broken in some fundamental way. These secondary thoughts, this layer of judgment and resistance, this is where the real suffering lives. Not in the thoughts themselves, but in your war against them. And here is the beautiful truth that Buddhist teaching offers. You can lay down your weapons. You can end the war. Not by defeating your thoughts, not by finally achieving control over your mind, but by recognizing that you were never meant to control your thoughts in the first place. You were meant to let them pass like clouds through the sky of your awareness. When you try to stop thinking, what happens? The effort to stop generates more thoughts. Do not think about a white elephant. What appears in your mind? A white elephant. The very attempt to suppress thoughts energizes them, gives them importance, makes them multiply. This is why people sometimes report that their minds become even more active when they start meditating. They begin paying attention to something that was always happening, but now they notice it. And noticing it, they try to control it. And trying to control it, they create more mental activity. But when you shift from trying to control thoughts to simply observing them with curiosity and compassion, something remarkable happens. The thoughts continue, yes, but they lose their power over you. They pass through like weather patterns passing through a mountain valley. The valley does not try to stop the rain or hold on to the sunshine. It simply lets weather happen. And you can learn to let thoughts happen. Right now, even as you listen to these words, thoughts are probably arising in your mind. Maybe worries about tomorrow. Maybe memories of today. Maybe commentary about what you are hearing. Maybe judgments about whether this is working or whether you are doing it right. Notice those thoughts. Do not try to push them away. Simply recognize, there is a thought. There is another one. Like watching cars pass by from your front porch. You do not need to chase after every car that goes by. You do not need to stop the traffic. You simply let it pass while you remain seated, present, at peace. This is the practice Myozen was teaching Daichi. Not to stop thoughts, but to stop fighting thoughts. Not to achieve a blank mind, but to cultivate a mind that remains spacious and peaceful, regardless of how many thoughts arise. This practice does not happen overnight. Daichi practiced for years, gradually learning to observe his swift-moving mind without judgment, to let thoughts pass without engagement, to rest in the awareness that notices thoughts rather than identifying as the thoughts themselves. And slowly, naturally, without force, a deep peace emerged. Not the peace of no thoughts, the peace of freedom from needing thoughts to be different than they are. You can practice this tonight as you rest here. When a thought arises, any thought at all, simply notice it. Thought about tomorrow. Thought about something you said today. Thought about whether this will work. Worry thought. Planning thought. Memory thought. You do not need to engage with any of them. You do not need to solve anything or figure anything out right now. Just notice thoughts arising and passing, like waves on the ocean that do not disturb the depths. Let your breath flow easily. Let your body settle into stillness. And let your thoughts move through you like wind through trees, present but not problematic, noticed but not followed, allowed but not fought against. This is the beginning of peace. Not control, not conquest. Simply acceptance of what your mind naturally does. Feel your shoulders dropping now, releasing whatever tension you have been holding there. Your jaw can soften, creating space between your teeth. Your tongue rests easy in your mouth. All the small muscles around your eyes relax. There is nothing you need to see right now, nothing you need to watch for or guard against. You can trust this darkness to hold you safely. Your whole body becomes heavy, sinking deeper into the surface beneath you. And as your body settles, as your breathing slows, let your awareness simply rest here, noticing whatever arises without needing to change it. Thoughts will continue. That is natural, but you do not need to be swept away by them. You are learning to be the sky, vast and spacious, unmoved by the weather patterns passing through. Rest now in this understanding. Rest in this practice. And when you are ready, we will continue our journey together with another story from another time, another place, where someone else discovered this same liberating truth about the nature of mind. In the 12th century, deep in the mountains of Song Dynasty, China, a farmer named Wen Jing walked the 3-day journey to a Chan monastery renowned for its master, a man called simply Shifu, which meant simply teacher. Wen Jing had left behind his rice fields and his worried wife because he could no longer bear the way his mind tormented him with constant worry about the future. His fields might flood, or they might dry out. Bandits might steal his harvest, or officials might demand too much in taxes. His only son might fall ill, or his aging mother might die. The worries multiplied like mice in a granary, and Wen Jing had not slept a full night in longer than he could remember. His wife had finally said, "Go to the monastery. Talk to someone who understands the mind. Maybe they can help you. I cannot watch you destroy yourself with worry over things that have not happened and may never happen." The monastery occupied a narrow valley between steep mountains covered in bamboo and pine. A stream ran alongside the main buildings, and Wen Jing could hear its constant murmur as he approached the gate. A young monk greeted him, led him to a simple guest room, and told him that Shifu would see him the next morning after meditation. Wen Jing barely slept that night despite his exhaustion. His mind generated a new worry. What if Shifu refused to teach him? What if Shifu judged him as unworthy? What if he had come all this way for nothing? What if his rice was rotting in his absence? By the time the monastery bell rang for morning meditation, Wen Jing felt hollow with fatigue and anxiety. Shifu received him in a small tea room overlooking the stream. The master was perhaps 60, his face deeply lined but alert, his movements economical and precise. He poured tea for both of them, the stream of hot liquid falling in a perfect arc from pot to cup. Then he sat across from Wen Jing and waited. Wen Jing explained his problem, words tumbling out in a rushed flood. The constant worries, the sleepless nights, the way his mind seemed to create endless scenarios of potential disaster. He had tried everything he could think of to stop the worrying, but nothing worked. If anything, trying to stop made it worse. He felt trapped inside his own head. Shifu listened without interruption, sipping his tea occasionally. When Wen Jing finally fell silent, exhausted by his own confession, the master asked a single question. "Of all the worries you have carried over the years, how many came true?" Wen Jing sat with this question. He thought about the hundreds of disasters he had imagined. How many had actually happened? His son had not fallen ill. His mother had not died. The fields had not flooded or dried out. The bandits had not come. Yes, there had been difficulties. A bad harvest one year. A dispute with a neighbor. His wife's brief illness. But these were not the things he had worried about. They were different problems, unexpected ones. None of them improved by his years of anticipatory suffering. Almost none of them. He admitted quietly. And of those that did come true, did your worry prevent them? No. Did your worry prepare you to handle them better? Wen Jing thought about this. When real problems had arrived, he had simply dealt with them, fixed what needed fixing, adapted to what needed adapting. His worry had not helped. If anything, it had drained his energy, making him less capable when actual challenges appeared. No, he said again. My worry never helped with anything that actually happened. So, Shifu said gently, you have spent years experiencing imaginary disasters that never occurred and will never occur. Meanwhile, exhausting yourself so thoroughly that when real challenges arrive, you are less equipped to meet them. This is what we call the second arrow. He refilled Wen Jing's cup. The first arrow is actual pain. Your wife is sick. This is the first arrow. You feel concern. You take care of her. You fetch the doctor. These responses are natural and appropriate. But then you shoot the second arrow. What if she dies? What if I cannot manage without her? What if our son is left without a mother? What if I did something to cause this illness? What if the doctor cannot help? These thoughts are the second arrow, and they create far more suffering than the original situation ever could. Wen Jing felt this distinction land in his body. The difference between responding to what was actually happening versus catastrophizing about what might happen. The difference between present moment concern versus future-oriented anxiety. But how do I stop the second arrow? He asked. These thoughts arise automatically. I do not choose them. No, you do not choose them, Shifu agreed. But you can choose whether to believe them. You can choose whether to follow them. Come, let me show you something. He led Wen Jing outside to where the stream ran past the tea room. They stood on the bank, watching water flow around rocks, creating small eddies and ripples. Do you see that stick floating in the current? Shifu pointed to a piece of bamboo bobbing along in the stream. Your thoughts are like that stick. They arise, they move through, they disappear downstream. This is their nature. Now watch what happens if I try to stop the stick. He reached out with a long branch and blocked the bamboo's progress. The current continued flowing, but the stick stayed in place, held by the branch, creating resistance in the water. Do you see how holding the stick creates turbulence? The water must work harder to flow around the obstacle. This is what happens when you try to stop a thought. The thought wants to pass through, to complete its movement and disappear. But you hold on to it. You examine it. You argue with it. You try to solve it. And this creates turbulence in your mind. The thought that could have passed in 3 seconds takes up 3 hours of your attention. He released the branch, and the bamboo stick immediately moved downstream and out of sight. Now watch this. Another stick comes. He pointed to a second piece of bamboo approaching. This time, he did nothing. The stick floated past them and vanished around a bend in the stream. The water flowed smoothly, undisturbed. The stick comes, the stick goes. Thoughts arise, thoughts pass. This is natural. Trying to stop them creates suffering. Letting them pass creates peace. Wen Jing stood watching the stream, feeling something begin to release in his chest. So when a worry arises about my rice fields flooding, I do not try to solve the problem or prove to myself that the fields will not flood. Exactly. You simply notice. There is a flooding thought, and then you return your attention to the present moment. What is actually happening right now? Right now, you are standing beside a stream. Your fields are not flooding. They may never flood. You are creating imaginary suffering about an imaginary problem. This is the second arrow. The first arrow would be if your fields actually flooded. Then you would respond appropriately. But why suffer now over something that has not happened and may never happen? But what if thinking about it helps me prepare? What if worrying keeps me vigilant? Shifu smiled. This is what the worried mind always says. But tell me truly, Wenjing, does your worry feel like useful planning or does it feel like torment? Torment, Wenjing admitted. It feels like torment. Yes, because worry is not planning. Planning happens in the present moment. You look at your fields. You notice the soil is dry. You decide to irrigate tomorrow. This is present moment response. But worry is suffering about a future that does not exist yet and probably never will. You lie in bed at night, imagining floods that are not happening. This is the second arrow. The first arrow has not even occurred yet, but you are already bleeding from the second one. They walked slowly back toward the tea room. The morning sun had risen above the mountains and light filtered through the bamboo, creating moving patterns on the path. The practice is simple, but not easy. Shifu said, every time you notice your mind has gone to worry, you gently bring it back to the present moment. Not with violence, not with judgment. You do not say to yourself, I am a terrible person for worrying. I should be more mindful. Why cannot I stop this? That would be shooting a third arrow. You simply notice, there is a worry thought about the future, and you return to what is actually here now. The sound of the stream, the feeling of your feet on this path, your breath moving in and out, the temperature of the air on your skin. It sounds so simple, Wenjing said. It is simple, but your mind has practiced worry for decades. It has worn deep grooves in those patterns. So you will need to practice this return to the present moment thousands of times. Each time you do, you are creating a new groove, a new pattern. Gradually, over time, your mind will settle into this new way of being. Not because you forced it to stop worrying, but because you stopped feeding the worry with your attention. Wenjing stayed at the monastery for 3 more days. Each morning he meditated with the monks. Each afternoon he worked in the monastery gardens, learning to bring his full attention to the simple act of pulling weeds, watering plants, feeling soil between his fingers. Each evening he sat with Shifu and asked questions about the practice. What Wenjing discovered in those 3 days changed the remaining years of his life. He discovered that the present moment, when met directly, without mental commentary about past or future, contained no worry at all. Worry existed only in thoughts about time that did not exist yet. The actual moment he was living in was nearly always manageable, often pleasant, sometimes beautiful. The stream really was musical. The bamboo really did sway with hypnotic grace. His breath really did flow easily when he was not lost in future catastrophes. When he returned home, his wife noticed the change immediately. He still worked his fields with care and attention. He still prepared for possible difficulties in practical ways. But he no longer tortured himself with endless imaginings of disaster. When a worry thought arose, he noticed it, smiled slightly, and returned to what he was actually doing. Pulling weeds, eating rice, talking with his son, living his one actual life instead of suffering through hundreds of imaginary ones. And on the nights when his mind still produced worried thoughts before sleep, Wenjing would remember Shifu's image of the stream. The thoughts were sticks floating by. He did not need to stop them or grab them or solve them. He could simply watch them pass while he rested in the present moment, which was nearly always safe, nearly always peaceful, nearly always enough. The teaching in this story speaks directly to one of the most common forms of racing thoughts. Worry about the future. Your mind generates endless scenarios of things that might go wrong, problems that might arise, losses you might suffer. These thoughts feel important. They feel like your mind is protecting you, keeping you safe through vigilance. But nearly always, they are the second arrow, creating far more suffering than the actual events ever could. Think about your own worries tonight. How many of them are about things that have not happened yet? How many are about problems that might never arise? And even if they do arise, will your worry now prevent them or help you handle them better? Almost certainly not. Worry does not prevent disaster. It does not prepare you effectively. It simply makes you suffer in advance for misfortunes that may never occur. The Buddha taught that most human suffering comes from our relationship with time. We suffer over the past through regret, guilt, and resentment. We suffer over the future through worry, anxiety, and fear. But the actual present moment, when we meet it directly without all this mental commentary, is nearly always workable. Right now, as you lie here listening, what is actually wrong in this exact moment? Not in 5 minutes, or tomorrow, or next year, but right now, probably nothing. Your body is supported. You are breathing. You are safe. The present moment is almost always okay. This does not mean bad things never happen. They do. You will face real difficulties in your life. But when you do, you will handle them in present moment time, dealing with what is actually occurring rather than what might occur. And you will have so much more energy to handle real problems if you stop draining yourself with imaginary ones. Your practice tonight and in the nights to come is to notice when your mind has left this actual moment and traveled into future worry time. Not to judge yourself for this. Not to feel bad about worrying. Simply to notice, oh, there I am again, suffering over something that has not happened, and gently return to the present, to your breath, to the sounds around you, to the feeling of your body resting here, to this moment, which is the only moment you ever actually live in. Each time you make this return, you weaken the grooves of the worry habit and strengthen new grooves of present moment awareness. This does not happen through force or through willing yourself to stop worrying. It happens through patient, gentle, repeated practice of noticing and returning, over and over, 10,000 times if necessary, each time with compassion for yourself, each time trusting that this is the path to freedom. Right now, your worries about tomorrow do not need to be solved. They are thoughts floating through the stream of your mind. Let them float. Let them pass. You are here, in this moment, resting peacefully. That is enough. That is all there ever is. Just this. Just now. Just resting here. Let your breathing guide you deeper into stillness now. Each exhale, a small release. Each inhale, soft and easy. Your body knows how to rest. Your mind is learning how to let thoughts pass without grabbing them. And slowly, naturally, like sunrise emerging without effort, a deep quiet settles through you. Not the quiet of no thoughts. The quiet of peace underneath the thoughts. The quiet of awareness that remains undisturbed no matter how many thoughts arise. This quiet has always been there, waiting for you to discover it. And tonight, bit by bit, you are finding your way home. We journey now from Chinese mountain monasteries to a Korean hermitage high in the Sobaek Mountains, where another seeker wrestled with a different flavor of mental torment. Let your breath be long and slow. Notice how your chest rises and falls without any effort from you. How your heart beats steadily without any management from your conscious mind. Your body is wisdom itself, knowing exactly what to do without thought. Feel the weight of your body pressing down into the bed. Let gravity do its work. Let all the small muscles that have been holding you alert begin to release. Your eyes rest softly behind closed lids. Your face smooths into gentleness. There is no expression you need to hold, no appearance you need to maintain. We move now toward another teaching, another story from across the mountains of Buddhist Asia. A young woman this time, in 17th century Korea, who discovered something essential about the second arrow and the way we multiply our suffering by fighting with reality. Rest here as we continue together. Let the stories carry you deeper into peace. Let the wisdom settle into your bones. You are safe. You are held. All is well. In the autumn of 1663, a young woman named Myung left her family's estate near what is now Seoul and walked north for 5 days until she reached a small Seon hermitage in the Sobaek Mountains. She was 19 years old and had spent the previous 3 years learning about Buddhism from a nun who visited her family's household weekly to teach meditation to the women. The nun had seen something in Myung, a hunger for understanding that went beyond casual interest, and had suggested she spend time at the hermitage studying with the nun's own teacher, a master named Wol Myung, which meant moon bright. Myung's family was wealthy, connected to the royal court through her father's position as a government official. Her parents had raised her to be refined, educated, accomplished in poetry and music, prepared for marriage to someone of equal status. And Myung was indeed refined, educated, accomplished. But she was also deeply paden, profoundly unhappy in ways she could not fully articulate even to herself. The problem was that her mind would not leave her alone. Not with worries about the future like the farmer Wen Jing, but with relentless judgment of herself. Everything she did felt inadequate. When she played the gyeogyum, a traditional Korean zither, she heard every mistake. Every moment her fingers did not execute perfectly. When she wrote poetry, she saw only the awkward phrases, the cliched images, the failure to capture what she had intended. When she sat with family members, she replayed every word she had spoken, finding dozens of ways she had said the wrong thing, sounded stupid, revealed her inadequacy. The judgments came fast and constant. You are not smart enough. You are not beautiful enough. You are not kind enough. You are not spiritual enough. You try so hard, but you never measure up. Other women seem so confident, so at ease. What is wrong with you? Why can you not be better? Even when she tried to meditate, following the nun's instructions, her mind turned meditation itself into another arena for self-judgment. You are doing it wrong. Your posture is terrible. You are too distracted. Real practitioners can focus better than this. You will never achieve anything spiritual. You are fundamentally flawed. The voice in her head was unrelenting, and Myung had begun to wonder if she might be losing her mind. She could see objectively that her life was privileged, comfortable, filled with opportunities. But the constant stream of self-criticism made everything feel joyless, burdensome, colored with shame. She felt like she was wearing a harsh judge inside her head, and no matter what she did, she could not please this judge, could not earn approval, could not escape the verdict of not enough. When she arrived at the hermitage, autumn rain was falling steadily, turning the mountain paths to mud. She was exhausted from the journey, her expensive traveling robes soaked and ruined, her carefully arranged hair coming loose. A young nun met her at the gate and led her to a small room where she could change into dry clothes and rest. The room was simple, bare wood walls and floor, a sleeping mat, a small table, nothing else. Myung sat on the mat and suddenly, unexpectedly, began to cry. Not gentle tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from some place far below her conscious control. She was crying because the stark simplicity of the room confronted her with how much she had been performing in her regular life. Always trying to be correct, appropriate, admirable. The room demanded nothing of her. And in demanding nothing, it revealed how exhausting her constant self-monitoring had become. While Myung came to see her that evening, the master was perhaps 40, though her face had a quality that made age difficult to determine. She moved with the sort of physical ease that suggested someone completely at home in her body. And her eyes were alert, warm, penetrating. She sat across from Myung and waited. Myung tried to compose herself, to present properly, but found she had no energy left for performance. Instead, she simply told the truth about the relentless criticism in her head, about how exhausting it was to never feel adequate, about how meditation had become just another arena where she judged herself as failing, about how she had hoped that coming here might offer some escape, but even the journey up the mountain had been full of thoughts about how she was doing it wrong, complaining too much, not being strong enough. "I do not know what is wrong with me," she said finally. "Other people do not seem to have this problem. They seem content with themselves. But I can never be good enough. No matter what I do, there is always this voice telling me it is not right, not enough, not acceptable." Wul Myung listened with complete attention. When Myung fell silent, the master asked, "This voice that judges you, does it feel like you or does it feel like something else?" Myung considered this. "It feels like me, like my thoughts." "And do you choose to have these thoughts?" "No, they just appear. So they arise without your permission or control. These thoughts that cause you so much suffering, and yet you believe them completely. You take them as truth about who you are." Myung nodded, feeling tears welling up again. "What if I told you," Wul Myung said gently, "that these thoughts are not truth and they are not really you. They are simply mental formations, patterns your mind has learned, voices you have internalized from childhood, from culture, from experiences of not being accepted as you were. They feel like you because you have listened to them for so long. But they are no more you than clouds passing through the sky are the sky itself." "But how do I make them stop?" Myung asked. "I have tried. I have tried so hard to think differently, to be more positive, to stop being so critical. But they keep coming." "Of course they keep coming," Wul Myung said. "You are trying to fight them, which means you are engaging with them, giving them energy, making them stronger. This is like trying to calm turbulent water by hitting it with a stick. You only create more turbulence." She stood up and motioned for Myung to follow. Despite the late hour and the rain, she led Myung outside to a covered area where they could watch the downpour without getting wet. The sound of rain on the roof was almost deafening. Water poured from gutters, splashed in puddles, ran in small rivers down the mountain paths. "Tell me," Wul Myung said, "is this rain good or bad?" "Neither," Myung said. It is just rain. And the mountain, does it judge the rain? Does it think, this rain is too much? This rain is not enough. I do not like how this rain feels on my slopes. Myung smiled slightly despite herself. No, the mountain just receives whatever weather comes. Exactly. Now, what if you could be like the mountain? What if you could let your thoughts pour through you like rain, without judging them, without needing to stop them, without believing that they say anything true about who you fundamentally are? But these thoughts hurt, Myung said. They make me feel terrible about myself. Do they? Or does your belief in them make you feel terrible? Woo Myung asked. The thought arises. You are not good enough. This is just rain falling. But then you add to it. You think, this thought is true. There really is something wrong with me. I should not have thoughts like this. What is wrong with me that I think like this? Now the rain has become a flood. The first thought was the first arrow. All you're believing it and fighting it and judging yourself for having it. This is the second arrow. And the second arrow is where all your suffering lives. They stood watching the rain fall steadily, soaking everything, running off everything, changing nothing fundamentally about the mountain beneath. After a long silence, Myung asked, So what do I do when the critical thoughts arise? You practice what we call the observer stance. Woo Myung said, The thoughts arise. But instead of identifying as the thoughts, you identify as the awareness that notices thoughts. The thoughts say, you are inadequate. But the observer simply notes, there is an inadequate thought. Do you feel the difference? One is being swept away by the thought, believing it, suffering from it. The other is standing on the bank of the river, watching the thought float by. Is that possible, to just watch without being affected? It is not only possible, it is your natural state. Woo Myung said, before you learn to identify with every thought that arises, before you learn to believe every story your mind tells, you are simply aware, pure consciousness noticing experience. That consciousness is still here, beneath all the mental noise. Your practice is to rest as that awareness rather than as the thoughts themselves. Over the following months, Myung lived at the hermitage and trained intensively in this practice. Every morning she would sit in meditation, and her mind would immediately generate critical judgments. Your posture is wrong. You are too restless. You are failing at meditation. And instead of believing these thoughts or fighting them, she would practice simply noting them. Critical thought, judgment thought, inadequacy thought, not trying to stop them or change them, just watching them arise and pass like rain falling on the mountain. At first, this felt nearly impossible. The thoughts felt so true, so much like her, that distinguishing herself from them seemed absurd. But Woo Myung kept pointing her back to the gap between the thought and the awareness of the thought. That gap was where freedom lived. Gradually, slowly, something began to shift. The thoughts kept coming. Yes, but they lost their power to devastate her. She began to experience them more like weather patterns moving through, rather than like verdicts about her worth as a person. A thought would arise, you are inadequate, and instead of collapsing into shame, she would think, oh, there is the inadequacy story again, and continue with what she was doing. One afternoon, several months into her stay, she was working in the hermitage garden, pulling weeds, when she made a clumsy movement and knocked over an entire basket of vegetables she had just harvested. In the past, this small mistake would have triggered a cascade of self-judgment. But this time, she simply laughed. She noticed the judgment thought, trying to arise. You are so clumsy, so careless. But she did not grab onto it. The thought passed through like a bird flying across the sky, present for a moment and then gone, leaving no trace. That evening she went to see Wulmyong and told her about the incident. Wulmyong smiled broadly. This is it. This is the practice bearing fruit. The thoughts still arise, but you are no longer owned by them. You are no longer shooting the second arrow into yourself. I understand now what you meant about the mountain and the rain. Myong said, the mountain does not try to control the weather. It does not argue with the rain or judge itself for being rained upon. It simply allows the weather to be whatever it is while remaining fundamentally unmoved. I am learning to be the mountain. Yes, Wulmyong said. And the beautiful thing is that as you stop feeding the critical thoughts with your attention and belief, they will gradually arise less often. Not because you are forcing them away, but because you are no longer nurturing them. A plant you stop watering eventually stops growing, but even if they continue arising for the rest of your life, you will remain free because you will know they are just rain, just weather, just thoughts passing through, not truth about who you are. Myong eventually returned to her family, but she was fundamentally changed. She no longer needed to be perfect. She no longer needed to earn worth through accomplishment. She could play her geogeum with mistakes and enjoy the music anyway. She could write poetry that was merely adequate and find pleasure in the process. She could sit with her family and not replay every word afterwards, searching for failures. The critical thoughts still arose sometimes, but they no longer ruled her. She had become the mountain, allowing all weather to pass through without being disturbed by any of it. This story speaks to a different kind of racing thought than worry about the future. It speaks to the relentless self-judgment that so many people carry, the inner critic that never rests, never approves, never allows you to feel adequate exactly as you are. This voice can be so constant that you mistake it for truth, for your own authentic assessment of yourself. But it is not truth. It is simply a learned pattern, voices you internalized long ago, mental formations that arise from past experiences of not being accepted, not being enough, not measuring up to someone's standards. The practice Wulmyong taught Myong is radical because it does not try to replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts. It does not try to argue with the critical voice or prove it wrong. It simply teaches you to stop identifying as the voice. You are not the critic. You are the awareness that hears the critic. And from that awareness, the critic's words lose their power to wound you. Think about this distinction right now. When a self-critical thought arises, you typically think, I am not good enough. You identify as the thought itself. But you could equally think, there is a thought saying, I am not good enough. Same words, completely different relationship to them. In the first, you are the thought and you suffer. In the second, you are the observer of the thought and you remain free. This is not just semantic trickery. This is the core insight that liberates people from the tyranny of their own minds. You are not your thoughts. You are the consciousness that is aware of thoughts. Thoughts arise in you, to move through you, pass out of you. But you remain. The sky remains when clouds pass through. The mountain remains when rain falls. The ocean remains when waves rise and fall. And you, your essential awareness, remains untouched by whatever thoughts arise. When you grasp this, really grasp it in your direct experience, rather than just understanding it intellectually, a profound relaxation becomes possible. You no longer need to monitor every thought. judge every thought, fight with every thought. You can let thoughts be like rain, sometimes gentle, sometimes harsh, but always just weather, always just passing through, never defining who you essentially are. Tonight, as you rest here, you can practice this. When a thought arises, any thought, especially a self-critical one, practice the observer stance. Instead of, I am not good enough, notice there is a not good enough thought. Instead of, I cannot quiet my mind, notice there is a thought about mind quieting. Feel the difference. Feel how one contracts you into suffering and the other leaves you spacious and free. This practice is simple, but it is also revolutionary. It changes everything about your relationship with your mind. Because when you stop identifying as your thoughts, when you rest as the awareness that notices thoughts, you discover that you are vast, peaceful, fundamentally okay, regardless of what your mind is saying in any given moment. The critical voice can speak all it wants. You are the mountain, unmoved, allowing all weather to pass through. Let this understanding settle into you now. Let your body continue its relaxation, muscles releasing one by one, breath flowing easily, heartbeat steady and strong. Your mind may still be generating thoughts. That is fine. Let them pass like birds across the evening sky. You do not need to follow them or fight them. You can rest here as pure awareness, spacious and free, untouched by whatever mental weather moves through. This is your natural state. This is who you really are beneath all the noise. And tonight, gradually, gently, you are remembering. You are coming home to yourself. Feel how your whole body has become heavy now, sinking deeply into rest. Notice the quality of darkness behind your closed eyes. Notice sounds rising and fading. Notice your thoughts still moving but no longer demanding that you follow them. Everything is allowed to be exactly as it is. Everything is passing through you like weather through mountains. And you remain peaceful, present, free. In 14th century Tibet, high in the Yarlung Valley, there lived a woman named Pema Tso, whose mind created suffering out of thin air. She was 32 years old, married to a barley farmer, mother of 3 children, and blessed with what most would consider a good life. Yet Pema Tso spent her days tangled in mental knots of her own creation, unable to simply experience what was happening without layering it with stories, interpretations, and endless commentary. She had learned about Buddhism from visiting monks who passed through her village on pilgrimage routes, and something in their teachings had called to her. So one autumn, when her children were old enough to help their father with harvest work, she made the 5-day journey to a small meditation center where a teacher named Jigme practiced what Tibetans called lojong, the training of the mind through confronting difficulty. The meditation center occupied 3 simple buildings on a windswept plateau, surrounded by nothing but sky and mountains and the endless whistle of wind through grass. Pema Tso arrived exhausted, her feet blistered from walking, her traveling clothes stiff with dust. A young nun greeted her with warm barley tea and showed her to a small room with a single window looking out at the peaks. That first night, Pema Tso could not sleep. Her mind raced with thoughts about her children. Were they eating properly? Was her daughter remembering to milk the goats? Had her husband noticed the leak in the roof that needed fixing before winter? And mixed with these practical worries came deeper, more painful thoughts. Her husband had seemed relieved when she announced this journey. Perhaps he was glad to have her gone. Perhaps he found her tiresome with her constant worrying and nervousness. Perhaps he was happier without her. And then another layer of thoughts arose. Why did she always do this? Why could she never just trust that things would be fine? Other women seemed so capable, so confident. What was wrong with her that she needed to come to a meditation center to learn something that should be natural? The thoughts spiraled and multiplied, each one spinning off 3 more, until Pema Tso felt like she was drowning in mental noise. The next morning, hollow-eyed from sleeplessness, she went to meet Jigme. The teacher was perhaps 50, with a weathered face and eyes that missed nothing. He sat across from Pema Tso in a small room bare, except for cushions and a butter lamp, and listened as she tried to explain why she had come. The words poured out in a torrent. How her mind never stopped creating problems. How even good moments became tainted because she immediately worried they would not last or feared she did not deserve them. How she could turn the simplest interaction into hours of mental analysis, replaying every word, imagining all the ways she had failed, creating entire narratives about what people must think of her. How exhausting it was to live inside her own head. When she finally fell silent, Jigme asked a single question. When these thoughts arise, what do you do with them? I try to solve them, Pema Tso said. I think through every possible outcome. I examine every detail. I analyze what I did wrong and how I could do better. I plan for all the ways things might go badly. And does this help? Pema Tso opened her mouth to say yes, then closed it again. Did it help? She had always assumed that her constant mental work was necessary, protective, important. But had it ever actually prevented a problem or prepared her to handle one? No. If anything, by the time real difficulties arose, she was too exhausted from imaginary ones to respond effectively. No, she admitted quietly. It does not help. It makes everything worse. Jigme nodded slowly. The mind is like a fire. When you add fuel to fire, what happens? It burns bigger and hotter. Exactly. Your thoughts are the fire, and you are adding fuel constantly. Every time you engage with a thought, analyze it, try to solve it, argue with it, you are feeding the fire. The fire grows and grows until you cannot see anything else, cannot feel anything else. Your whole world becomes this burning. He reached out and adjusted the wick on the butter lamp between them, making the flame smaller. But if you stop adding fuel, what happens to fire? It dies down. Not dies, Jigme corrected gently. It returns to its natural state. Small, manageable, serving its purpose without consuming everything. This is what we will teach you. Not to extinguish your mind, but to stop feeding the fire of mental proliferation. Over the weeks that followed, Pema Tso learned what the Tibetans called the practice of turning obstacles into the path. Instead of trying to have better thoughts or stop bad thoughts, she learned to work directly with her mind's tendency toward endless elaboration. The first lesson was recognizing what Jigme called papanyaka in the ancient language, or conceptual proliferation. This was different from simple thinking. Simple thinking was useful. You think, I need to prepare food, and you prepare food. But papancha was thinking about thinking. It was the mind spreading out from a simple fact or sensation and building entire castles of interpretation. Story, meaning, fear, and judgment. For example, one morning during meditation, Pema Tso heard other students laughing softly in another room. This was a simple sound, a neutral fact. But immediately her mind proliferated. They are laughing. Are they laughing at me? Did I do something embarrassing yesterday? I probably did. I never know how to act properly. They must think I am foolish. Everyone here is more advanced than me. I should not have come. I am wasting the teacher's time. My husband was right to want me gone. I am useless at everything. In less than 10 seconds, her mind had gone from a sound of laughter to a complete narrative about her worthlessness. None of it connected to anything real. All of it built from pure mental fabrication. This was papancha. This was the fire consuming everything. Jigme taught her to catch papanya at its beginning, to recognize the moment when simple perception became proliferating story. The laughter was just laughter. The thought they are laughing at me was the first branch of proliferation. And from that single branch, hundreds more grew instantly unless she stopped feeding them. When you notice papanka beginning, Jigme said, you do not fight it. You do not add more thoughts about how you should not be having these thoughts. That would be adding fuel. Instead, you simply name it. You say, mentally, proliferating, and then you return to your breath, to your body, to what is actually present right now. But there was a second, deeper practice he taught her. This was the Lojong practice of Tonglen, which meant sending and taking. When Pema Tso felt overwhelmed by anxiety or mental chaos, instead of trying to escape it or fix it, she would breathe it in completely, accept it fully, and then, on the out-breath, she would send out peace, calm, spaciousness. At first this seemed backward, even dangerous. Accept her anxiety, breathe it in, would that not make it worse? But Jigme explained that resistance to difficult experience was what gave it power. The more she tried to push away her racing thoughts, her worry, her mental chaos, the more energy she gave them. But if she could turn toward them with compassion, if she could let them be without fighting, they lost their grip. Think of it this way, he said. Your mind is like a frightened child crying in the night. If you yell at the child to be quiet, does the crying stop? No, Pema Tso said, the child cries harder. But if you go to the child, hold the child, say, it is okay. You are here. Let the child cry until the crying naturally subsides. What happens? The child calms down. Your racing mind is that frightened child. It needs your kindness, not your anger. It needs your acceptance, not your rejection. When you breathe in your anxiety and breathe out compassion toward yourself, you are being the loving parent to your own mind. One afternoon, several weeks into her stay, Pema Tso was washing dishes in the communal kitchen when a thought arose about her youngest child. Had she remembered to tell him how to feed the chickens properly? What if he forgot and the chickens died? What if her family blamed her for coming here instead of staying home where she belonged? The familiar spiraling began. But this time, Pema Tso paused. She recognized papanka starting. She set down the bowl she was washing and placed one hand on her heart. She breathed in, accepting completely the worry, the fear, the guilt, the sense of inadequacy. She let it all be there, heavy and real. And then she breathed out, imagining sending peace to herself, to her child, to her whole family, to every worried mother who had ever felt this way. To her amazement, the worry did not multiply. It did not spiral into hours of mental torment. It rose, was acknowledged, was held with kindness, and then naturally began to settle. Like that frightened child, once it felt heard and held, it could rest. She stood at the washing basin, her hands in warm water, tears running down her face, feeling something she had not felt in years. The simplicity of this moment, the sound of water, the warmth on her hands, the fading worry, moving through her like weather through a valley, present but passing. That evening, she went to Jigme and told him what had happened. He smiled, his weathered face crinkling with pleasure. Now you are beginning to understand. Your thoughts are not the enemy. Your resistance to thoughts is the enemy. When you stop fighting your mind and start befriending it, everything changes. But what about real problems? Pema Tso asked. What about when something actually needs to be solved or addressed? Ah, Jigme said, this is the beautiful thing. When you stop wasting energy on mental proliferation, on worrying about problems that do not exist, you have so much more clarity and energy to address actual problems when they arise. You can see situations as they truly are, not covered over with layers and layers of interpretation and story. You can respond wisely instead of reacting from exhaustion and confusion. Pema Tso stayed at the center for 3 months. When she finally returned home to her family, she was fundamentally changed. Her husband noticed it first. She seemed more present, more at ease, quicker to laugh. Her children felt it too. Their mother was somehow softer, less anxious, more available. The racing thoughts still came sometimes. Old patterns do not disappear overnight, but now Pema Tso had a way to work with them. When she noticed Papanka beginning, she would pause, name it, and return to her breath. When she felt anxiety rising, she would practice Tonglen, breathing in her own difficulty with compassion, breathing out peace. And gradually, over time, the racing thoughts arose less frequently, lasted for shorter periods, and caused her far less suffering. Years later, other women from her village began coming to her for advice. They saw the peace in her eyes and wanted to know her secret. And Pema Tso would smile and tell them about the fire that consumes everything when you keep feeding it, and the child who calms down when held with kindness, and the simple practice of letting thoughts be without making them into stories that obscure the truth of this present moment, which is nearly always workable, nearly always enough. This teaching about papanja, or mental proliferation, comes from some of the oldest Buddhist texts and speaks directly to the experience of racing thoughts. It is not just that you have many thoughts. It is that each thought spawns 10 more. Each worry branches into hundreds of scenarios. Each small sensation becomes an entire narrative about what it means. The mind is designed to think. This is not a problem. But when thinking becomes proliferation, when one thought explodes into cascading chains of interpretation, analysis, story, and emotion, we have moved from useful mental activity into suffering. And the beautiful insight of this teaching is that proliferation requires fuel. It requires your engagement, your belief, your participation. When you recognize a thought beginning to proliferate, you have a choice. You can follow it, engage with it, try to solve it, argue with it, all of which adds fuel and makes the fire grow. Or you can simply name it, proliferating, and return to what is actually present. Your breath, your body, the sounds around you, this moment, unadorned by story. This is not suppression. You are not pushing the thought away. You are simply choosing not to feed it, not to follow it down the endless branching pathways it wants to take you. And when you stop feeding it, it naturally subsides, returns to normal levels, stops consuming your whole awareness. The Tonglen practice Pema Tso learned adds another dimension to this. In Instead of seeing your racing thoughts as an enemy to be defeated, you turn toward them with compassion. You breathe them in completely, accepting that this is your experience right now. And then you breathe out spaciousness and peace. This acceptance paradoxically releases the thought's power over you. As long as you resist your mind, as long as you judge yourself for having racing thoughts, you create that second arrow of suffering, that additional layer of pain. But when you can say, yes, my mind is racing right now. This is difficult, but I can hold this difficulty with kindness. The suffering begins to transform, not because the thoughts instantly stop, but because your relationship with them changes. Tonight, as you rest here, you can experiment with this practice. When a thought arises and you notice it beginning to proliferate, beginning to pull you into that familiar cascade of worry or analysis or story, simply note proliferating and come back to your breath. Do not judge yourself. Do not try to force anything. Just gently, kindly, return to this moment. And if you notice anxiety or mental chaos, try breathing it in on your inhale, accepting it fully, and breathing out peace on your exhale. Breathe in your own difficulty. Breathe out compassion toward yourself. Breathe in the racing mind. Breathe out spaciousness and calm. This is not magic. You will not be instantly cured, but you are learning a new way of being with your mind, a way that does not require constant battle, constant exhaustion, constant suffering. You are learning to be the loving parent to your own racing thoughts, holding them with kindness until they naturally calm down. Let your body continue sinking deeper into rest now. Notice how your breathing has perhaps become a little slower, a little deeper. Your shoulders have dropped lower. Your face has softened. Even as thoughts continue moving through your mind, you are learning that you can remain at peace underneath them. The thoughts are just weather, mental weather. Sometimes stormy, sometimes calm, but always passing, always moving, never permanent. And you are the vast space in which this weather occurs. You are not the storm. You are the sky that holds all storms without being disturbed by them. Rest in this understanding. Rest in this practice. And let us continue our journey together with another story from another tradition, another teacher who found freedom from the tyranny of racing thoughts. Your breathing flows so easily now, without any effort from you. Your heartbeat continues its steady rhythm, a faithful companion requiring no management. Everything in your body knows what to do without thought. Let your mind learn this same wisdom. Let it learn to simply be without needing to proliferate endless stories. We travel now from Tibetan plateaus to the river valleys of Vietnam, where a different teacher discovered his own path through the chaos of mental noise. Feel your whole body heavy and warm. Notice the darkness behind your closed eyes, peaceful and safe. Notice sounds rising and fading, all of them temporary, none requiring your attention. When you are ready, let yourself drift with me into another time, another place, where wisdom waited to be discovered. In 1961, in a monastery near Hue in central Vietnam, a young monk named Linh sat in meditation and felt his mind fracturing from the weight of what he witnessed daily. He was 23 years old and had entered monastic life at 16, seeking peace in a world of suffering. But the war had found even the monasteries. Villages burned. Families fled. Children orphaned. Monks struggled to remain in meditation when the sound of artillery shook the walls. Linh had always been sensitive, deeply affected by the pain of others. As a child, he had cried when he saw water buffaloes beaten by farmers. He had brought home injured birds and worried over them until they healed or died. His parents had thought he was too tender for the world, and perhaps they were right. The monastery should have been his refuge, but the war made refuge impossible, and so his mind had become a prison. All day, every day, thoughts about suffering poured through him in relentless streams. The woman he had seen yesterday carrying her dead infant, the old man begging for rice with hands that trembled from starvation, the young soldiers, barely older than children, their faces already hardened by what they had done and seen. Round and round these images played in his mind, accompanied by the endless questions. Why? Why such suffering? Why could he not stop it? Why was he safe in the monastery while others suffered? What right did he have to seek peace when the world burned? The thoughts gave him no rest. During meditation, they screamed louder. During work, they shadowed every action. At night, they invaded his dreams. He grew thin, hollow, barely present, even when speaking with others. His teacher, a monk named Thay Min, which meant teacher of brightness, grew increasingly concerned. One morning after meditation, Thay Min called Lin to his room. The teacher was perhaps 60, with a gentle manner and eyes that held both deep sorrow and deep peace, as if he had learned to hold both simultaneously. He poured tea for Lin, and they sat in silence for several minutes before the teacher spoke. "Tell me what is happening in your mind." And Lin told him about the relentless thoughts about suffering, about the guilt he felt for being safe, about how he could not stop thinking about all the pain in the world, could not stop replaying every terrible thing he had witnessed, could not stop questioning why he was not doing more, helping more, fixing more. Thay Min listened without interruption. When Lin finally fell silent, exhausted by his own confession, the teacher asked, "When you think about all this suffering, does it reduce the suffering?" Lin felt the question land like a stone in water. "No." "Does it help you respond more effectively to suffering when you encounter it?" "No. I feel paralyzed, overwhelmed." "Does it bring peace to your mind or to the world?" "No." Thay Min refilled their teacups. "Then, what does all this thinking accomplish?" "I do not know," Lin said quietly. "I feel like I should be thinking about it. Like if I stop thinking about suffering, I am abandoning those who suffer." The teacher said, "This is a very common confusion. You believe that thinking about suffering is the same as helping with suffering. You believe that being present means being mentally present with every terrible thing that happens everywhere. But consider this. Right now, in this moment, there is suffering happening all over the world. In 1,000 villages, in 10,000 homes, beings are experiencing pain. Can you hold all of that suffering in your mind at once? No. I try, but I cannot. And if you could somehow think about all suffering simultaneously, would that suffering decrease by even a single grain? No, Lin admitted. So your mind races through suffering past, suffering imagined, suffering witnessed, suffering anticipated. But none of this mental activity reduces any actual suffering. In fact, it adds one more suffering to the world. Yours? So now there are 10,000 sufferings plus one. Lin felt tears welling. But what else can I do? How can I just ignore what is happening? I am not asking you to ignore anything, Thay Min said gently. I am asking you to understand the difference between being present to suffering when it arises directly in front of you, and allowing your mind to search for suffering in every moment, even when you are safe, even when there is nothing you can do. even when the present moment contains no emergency. He gestured out the window to the monastery garden where other monks were working, tending plants, carrying water. Look at them. Do you think they are unaware of the suffering in the world? No. Do you think they do not care? No. Yet they are able to be fully present to the simple task of watering plants. They are able to find peace in the present moment, even while knowing the world contains great suffering. This is not ignorance. This is wisdom. He turned back to Lin. The present moment, when met directly without the mind racing through past and future, is almost always bearable. Right now, in this moment, are you suffering? Lin checked his experience. He was sitting in a safe room. The morning light was beautiful. His teacher was kind. His tea was warm. The war felt far away. No, he admitted. Not right now. Yet your mind insists on bringing suffering from outside this moment into this moment. Your mind cannot bear for there to be even 1 second of peace because it has decided that peace is selfish. That peace means forgetting. That peace means not caring. Thamin set down his cup. But the Buddha taught something different. He taught that you cannot reduce suffering in the world while drowning in suffering yourself. A person who is drowning cannot rescue others who are drowning. You must first reach solid ground yourself. You must find peace in the present moment, not to escape suffering, but to have the strength and clarity to respond to suffering skillfully when it appears before you. Over the following months, Taimin taught Lin a practice that changed everything. It was deceptively simple. Whenever Lin noticed his mind racing to suffering that was not present in his immediate experience, he would bring his full attention to his breath and silently recite a phrase. Breathing in, I know I am breathing in. Breathing out, I know I am breathing out. That was all. No fighting the thoughts. No judging himself for having them. Just a gentle return to the simplest fact of existence. Breath flowing in, breath flowing out. This moment, this body, this reality. At first, Lin could maintain this presence for only seconds before his mind pulled him back to war, suffering, guilt. But each time, without judgment, he would return, breathing in, breathing out. Here, now, Thamin explained that this was not ignoring suffering. This was learning to respond rather than react. When you are present in this moment, when your mind is not racing through past traumas and future catastrophes, you have access to a deep well of peace and clarity. And from that peace, when actual suffering appears before you, when someone needs help, when action is required, you can respond with full presence and effectiveness instead of from the exhausted, scattered state of a mind that has been racing for years. Think of it like this, the teacher said one afternoon as they walked in the garden. Imagine a doctor who spends every moment when he is not with patients thinking about diseases, imagining terrible diagnoses, replaying past cases where patients died, worrying about future emergencies. Do you think this doctor can be effective? No, Ling said. He would be exhausted, anxious, unable to think clearly. But a doctor who can be fully present during his time off, who can enjoy his tea, watch the sunset, laugh with friends, this doctor returns to his patients refreshed, clear, able to respond skillfully. The same is true for you. You want to help reduce suffering. I know this. I see this in you. But to do so effectively, you must learn to rest when rest is possible, to be present when presence is available, to let your mind have peace in the moments between crises. Lin practiced this teaching faithfully, and gradually, remarkably, his racing mind began to calm. Not because suffering in the world decreased. The war continued. Terrible things still happened. But Lin learned that he did not need to carry all suffering in his mind at all times. He learned that being present to this breath, this step, this cup of tea was not selfish or forgetful. It was necessary. It was wise. And he discovered something profound. When he stopped drowning in thoughts about suffering and learned to rest in present moment peace, he actually became more helpful to others. When someone came to the monastery in crisis, Lin could be fully present for them without his mind immediately racing to 1,000 other tragedies. When work needed to be done, he could do it with complete attention instead of scattered, anxious effort. When meditation was called for, he could actually meditate instead of spending hours mentally replaying horrors. He had thought that his constant thinking about suffering made him compassionate. But he came to understand that real compassion requires a peaceful mind. You cannot pour water from an empty cup. You cannot offer genuine presence to others when you are not present to yourself. Years later, when the war finally ended and Lin had become a teacher himself, students would come to him with minds racing through global suffering, personal tragedies, endless worries. And he would teach them what Thaymin had taught him. The present moment is almost always bearable. The racing mind is almost always creating suffering that is not actually here right now. And the path to truly helping others begins with learning to be present, peaceful, and clear in yourself. This teaching from Vietnamese mindfulness tradition addresses a profound confusion many of us carry. We believe that worrying about suffering means we care about suffering. We believe that constant mental activity around problems means we are working on problems. We believe that letting our minds rest means we are selfish or disconnected. But as Thaymin taught Lin, mental racing does not reduce suffering. It adds to it. When your mind is constantly pulling you out of the present moment and into past traumas or future catastrophes, you are creating suffering for yourself without helping anyone else. You are drowning, and a drowning person cannot rescue others. The practice of returning to the breath, of anchoring in present moment awareness, is not escape. It is the development of the stable ground from which you can actually respond skillfully to difficulty when it arises. When your mind is racing, when you are exhausted from mental proliferation, when you are scattered across 1,000 imagined problems, you cannot be effective. You cannot think clearly, act wisely, or be genuinely present for others. But when you learn to rest in this moment, to recognize that right now, in this actual present, you are almost always okay. You develop a well of peace and clarity that you can draw from when real challenges appear. The difference between reacting from exhaustion and responding from presence is profound. Notice how this applies to your own racing thoughts tonight. How many of them are about suffering that is not actually present in this moment? How many are replaying past difficulties or imagining future ones? How many are creating problems that do not exist right here? Right now, the invitation is not to become callous or disconnected. The invitation is to recognize that your mind's racing does not help anyone, including yourself. And that learning to return to your breath, to anchor in present moment awareness, is not selfish. It is essential. It is how you develop the clarity and peace necessary to be genuinely helpful when help is needed. Right now, as you lie here, you can practice this. When your mind races to something that is not actually happening in this moment, you can gently bring it back. Breathing in, I know I am breathing in. Breathing out, I know I am breathing out. Simple as that. Not fighting the thoughts. Just returning to this breath, this moment, this reality that is nearly always more peaceful than the mind's racing suggests. Let your body continue its deep relaxation. Feel how your shoulders have dropped, how your jaw has softened, how your breath flows without effort. Your body already knows how to be at peace. Your mind is learning, and with patient, gentle practice, the racing will gradually calm. The thoughts will lose their power to pull you away from this moment, and you will discover a peace that exists underneath all mental weather. Rest here now. Rest in this breath. Rest in this moment. And let another story find you, another teaching from another tradition, as we continue this gentle journey together into wisdom and sleep. Your eyelids are so heavy now, your whole body sinking deeper into rest. Sounds arise and fade, all temporary, all part of this moment's texture. Your mind may still generate thoughts, but you are learning not to be owned by them. They arise, they pass, and you remain peaceful beneath it all. We journey now to ancient India, to the time of the Buddha himself, where a teaching about mental proliferation was given that has guided practitioners for 25 centuries. Let yourself drift with me. Let the stories carry you deeper into rest. All is well. You are safe. This moment is enough. In northern India, in the 5th century before the Common Era, a householder named Bahia lived in the city of Savatthi and possessed a mind that moved with such speed that even he could not keep up with it. He was a merchant who dealt in cloth, and his mind served him well in his business. He could calculate prices faster than his competitors, remember complex details of deals, plan 3 negotiations ahead while conducting the one in front of him. But this mental quickness that served him in the marketplace became torture when he tried to rest. The moment he stopped working, his mind continued racing, jumping from thought to thought to thought with dizzying speed. He would lie in bed at night, and his mind would replay every conversation from the day, analyze every transaction, plan tomorrow's work, remember similar situations from the past, imagine possible future scenarios. All of this happening simultaneously in a cascading avalanche of mental activity. He had heard teachings about meditation and tried to practice, but sitting still was agony. Within seconds of trying to focus on his breath, his mind had generated 50 thoughts about his breathing, about whether he was breathing correctly, about his posture, about the pain in his knee, about whether the pain meant something was wrong with him, about what would happen if he became ill, about his business if he could not work. On and on, branching and spreading, each thought spawning 10 more before the first had even finished. One day, exhausted and desperate, Bahia went to hear the Buddha teach. He had heard that this teacher understood the mind in ways that could bring peace. Though Bahia was skeptical, he had tried so many practices, consulted so many teachers. Nothing had helped. The Buddha was teaching in a mango grove outside the city. Perhaps 200 people sat listening. Bahia arrived late and stood at the back, barely able to hear. But even from a distance, something about the Buddha's presence struck him. The teacher sat with complete stillness, not the forced stillness of someone trying not to move, but a natural, settled quality, as if he had nowhere else he needed to be, nothing else he needed to do. When the teaching ended, Bahia pushed through the crowd, desperate to speak with the Buddha before he left. Other students tried to stop him, saying the teacher was tired, needed to rest. But Bahia was insistent. He reached the Buddha just as the teacher was preparing to depart. "Please," Bahia said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "My mind will not stop. I have tried everything. I cannot meditate because thoughts come too fast. I cannot rest because my mind races. I am drowning in my own thoughts. Can you help me?" The Buddha looked at him with eyes that seemed to see directly into Bahia's racing mind, and spoke words so simple and yet so profound that Bahia would remember them for the rest of his life. "In the scene, let there be just the scene. In the herd, just the herd. In the sensed, just the sensed. In the cognized, just the cognized. Then you will not be with that. When you are not with that, you will not be in that. When you are not in that, you will be neither here nor beyond, nor in between. This itself is the end of suffering." Bahia stood stunned. At first the words made no sense. Let the scene be just the scene? What did that mean? But as he stood there, something in him understood even before his conscious mind could articulate it. His mind always added something to every experience. He never just saw. He saw and immediately thought about what he was seeing, made judgments about it, compared it to other things he had seen, wondered what it meant, spun stories about it. He never just heard. He heard and instantly labeled, categorized, liked or disliked, remembered other sounds, imagined implications. Every sense contact became layered with mental proliferation. The simple fact of seeing a tree became see tree. What kind of tree? Is it healthy? I saw a tree like that in my childhood. My childhood was difficult. Why was my childhood difficult? What is wrong with me that I cannot be happy? What if I am never happy? All of this happening in milliseconds. So fast he did not even notice the accumulation, the spreading, the proliferation. But what if he could just let seeing be seeing, just let hearing be hearing? What if he could experience this moment without adding all that mental commentary, all that elaboration, all those stories? The Buddha was already walking away, but Bahia stood rooted to the spot, experiencing something entirely new. He looked at the mango tree in front of him. Usually, looking at a tree triggered cascades of thoughts. But now, following the Buddha's instruction, he simply let seeing be seeing. Green leaves, dappled light, the shape of branches against sky. Just that, nothing more. And in that moment of just seeing, with no mental elaboration, a profound peace opened. It lasted only seconds before his mind's habit reasserted itself, flooding back in with commentary and analysis. But Bahia had felt it. The peace that exists when you stop adding to experience. The rest that comes when you let things simply be what they are. He began practicing this teaching obsessively. Walking through the marketplace, instead of his usual mental racing about deals and negotiations, he would practice. In the scene, just the scene. Color, shape, movement, nothing more. In the herd, just the herd. Voice, birdsong, cartwheels, just sounds, without all the stories about what they mean. At first, this was nearly impossible. His mind's habit of proliferation was so strong, so automatic, that within a fraction of a second of any sense contact, the elaboration began. But Bahia was persistent. Again and again, he would notice he had gone into mental proliferation and gently return. Just this seeing, just this hearing, just this. What he discovered over weeks and months was that most of his mental racing was this proliferation, this endless adding to simple experience. A physical sensation of tightness in his chest was just sensation. But within milliseconds, his mind would create an entire narrative. What does this tightness mean? Am I having a heart problem? What if I die? What will happen to my family? I need to see a physician. But physicians are expensive. I should have saved more money. Why did I spend so much on that wedding gift? I always make poor decisions with money. The sensation itself was simple, neutral. All the suffering came from the proliferation, the spreading, the stories the mind built upon the simple fact of sensation. And this was true for everything. A glance from someone in the market was just seeing, but the mind immediately proliferated. Did that person seem angry? Did I offend them somehow? Do they dislike me? What will they tell others about me? The simple glance became an entire narrative within seconds. As Bahia learned to catch this process and return to just the direct experience, just the scene, just the herd, the racing gradually calmed. Not because he forced his mind to stop, but because he stopped feeding the proliferation, stopped engaging with the endless elaboration that turned every simple moment into a complex problem. One afternoon, perhaps 6 months after first hearing the Buddha's teaching, Bahia was sitting in his shop when he realized he had been at peace for the entire morning. This was so unusual that he actually stopped to examine what was different. And he recognized that his mind was still thinking. It had not become blank, but it was thinking only what was necessary for the task at hand. See customer. Here, request. Show cloth. Agree on price. Simple, direct, no proliferation. And in the spaces between tasks, his mind simply rested. Watching dust motes drift in sunlight through the doorway, hearing sounds from the street, being present to what was, without racing ahead or back, without adding story upon story, without proliferating every sensation into an entire universe of interpretation. He went to find the Buddha to thank him, and found the teacher giving another talk in the same mango grove. Bahia waited until the teaching ended and then approached. "Teacher," he said, bowing deeply, "you gave me an instruction months ago that changed my life. I came to tell you that I understand now what you meant. The mind proliferates. It takes simple seeing and creates 1,000 thoughts. Takes simple hearing and builds entire worlds. And all my suffering came from this proliferation, not from the actual experiences themselves." The Buddha smiled slightly. "Yes, this is the root of what we call dukkha, suffering or unsatisfactoriness. Not the contact between sense organs and sense objects. That is neutral. But the mind's tendency to spread out from that contact, to elaborate, to create self and other, like and dislike, past and future, all of it built upon the simple fact of contact. When you can rest in just the scene, just the herd, the proliferation ceases, and with it, suffering ceases." "I still think," Bahia said, "but now I am not owned by thinking." "Exactly," the Buddha said. "Thinking itself is not the problem. Conceptual proliferation is the problem, and you have found the way to be free." This teaching from the oldest Buddhist texts goes directly to the heart of racing thoughts. The mind does not just experience reality. It proliferates from every experience, spreading out, elaborating, creating layer upon layer upon layer of interpretation, story, meaning, judgment. And we mistake all this proliferation for reality itself. But the actual moment, met directly without proliferation, is simple. There is seeing, there is hearing, there is sensation. These arise, exist briefly, pass away. The mind adds everything else. And in that adding, in that spreading out from simple contact, suffering is created. Your racing thoughts tonight are mostly proliferation. A sensation in your body becomes 20 thoughts about what the sensation means. A memory arises and becomes 100 thoughts, analyzing the memory, judging your past self, wondering what would be different if you had acted differently. A worry about tomorrow proliferates into entire scenarios, none of which are happening, all of which create suffering. But the teaching offers liberation. In the scene, let there be just the scene. When a thought arises, let it be just a thought, not a command, not a truth, not a problem requiring solution. Just a thought, arising, existing briefly, passing away. When a sensation appears, let it be just sensation. When a sound occurs, just sound. This does not mean you become a robot. It means you stop adding unnecessary layers to simple reality. Your mind can still think when thinking is useful, but it does not need to proliferate endlessly, spreading from every tiny stimulus into vast cascades of mental activity. As you rest here tonight, you can practice this. When you notice your mind racing, getting caught up in proliferation, gently return to direct experience. The sensation of breathing, just that. The sound of your own heartbeat, just that. The feeling of your body against the bed, just that. No story about any of it. No interpretation, no analysis. Just this direct, simple experiencing. And in that simplicity, a deep peace that has been waiting underneath all the proliferation all along. Let your body be completely still now, heavy, sinking into sleep. Your mind is learning to be simple, to rest in direct experience without proliferating endlessly. Thoughts may still arise, but you are not feeding them, not following them, not building them into vast structures that obscure this simple moment. Just breathing, just resting, just this. Let that be enough. Let this moment, free from proliferation, free from mental racing, be the doorway into deep, peaceful sleep. We have traveled far tonight, through many traditions, many teachers, many teachings, from Japanese monasteries to Chinese streams, from Korean hermitages to Tibetan plateaus, from Vietnamese temples to ancient India, and everywhere, the same truth. The racing mind is not your enemy. Your relationship with your racing mind creates suffering or creates freedom. Tonight you have learned that you are not your thoughts. You have learned about the second arrow, how resistance multiplies suffering. You have learned that the observer is free while the one swept away suffers. You have learned that mental proliferation can be recognized and gently released. You have learned to rest in the present moment rather than drowning in imagined pasts and futures. These teachings are not merely concepts. They are practices, invitations, pathways to freedom that millions of people across thousands of years have walked before you. The racing thoughts that kept you awake tonight have been experienced by seekers and sufferers throughout human history, and the wisdom to work with them skillfully has been preserved, refined, passed down, tested, and proven. You do not need to perfect any of this. You do not need to become someone whose mind never races. You simply need to remember that when the racing begins, you have options. You can notice without following. You can observe without identifying. You can accept without resisting. you can return to direct experience without proliferating. Each time you practice this, you strengthen a new way of being with your mind. Each time you choose not to feed the racing, not to follow the proliferation, not to shoot that second arrow, you create a new groove, a new pattern, a new possibility. And gradually, naturally, without force, the racing loses its power over you. Perhaps the most important thing to understand is this: peace does not come from having no thoughts. Peace comes from knowing you are not your thoughts, that thoughts arise and pass like weather through the vast sky of your awareness, and that sky remains untouched, unchanging, always at peace, regardless of what weather moves through it. You are that sky. Tonight, tomorrow, always. The racing thoughts are temporary weather. They come, they go, they change. But you, your essential nature, your deepest self, remains spacious, peaceful, free. As you drift now into sleep, let yourself rest in that understanding. Let your body become completely heavy, completely supported. Let your breathing be soft and natural. Let sounds arise and fade without needing your attention. Let thoughts move through without needing your engagement. You are learning something profound tonight. You are learning that peace is not something you achieve. Peace is what you discover when you stop creating its opposite. When you stop feeding the racing, fighting the thoughts, judging yourself, spinning proliferations, shooting second arrows. When you simply let this moment be exactly what it is and rest as the awareness that notices everything without being disturbed by anything. This is your true nature. This is who you really are. And tonight, you are coming home to yourself. Sleep now, dear friend. Rest deeply. Let these teachings settle into places beneath conscious thought. Let ancient wisdom work its magic while you sleep, transforming your relationship with your mind in ways you will discover when you wake. You have done enough. You have learned enough. You are enough. Exactly as you are, with whatever mind you have, racing or calm. You are perfectly acceptable, perfectly worthy, perfectly fine. Let go now. Let everything go. The trying, the fixing, the improving, the solving. Just rest. Just breathe. Just be. Tomorrow you will wake different. Not because your mind will suddenly be different, but because you will have new tools, new understanding, new ways of meeting whatever your mind presents. The racing thoughts may still come, but you will know what to do. You will know how to observe rather than be swept away. You will know how to avoid the second arrow. You will know how to stop feeding proliferation. You will know how to return to the present. And that knowledge, that practice, will gradually transform everything. For now, sleep. Deep, peaceful, restorative sleep. You are safe. You are held. All is well. Good night. In the autumn of 1847, in the mountains of northern Thailand near the Burmese border, a merchant named Somchai arrived at a forest monastery seeking help for a problem that had plagued him for 3 years. He was 42 years old, successful in the teak trade, respected in his community, and absolutely tormented by his own mind. The problem had begun after a business rival spread false rumors about Somchai cheating customers. The rumors were completely untrue, but they spread through the trading networks like fire through dry grass. Some customers believed them. Some old friends began treating him with suspicion. And though Somchai eventually cleared his name through honest dealing and the testimony of satisfied customers, something had broken inside him. Now, 3 years later, even though the rumors were long forgotten by most people, Somchai could not forget them. His mind replayed the injustice constantly. He would be conducting business and suddenly remember someone's suspicious look, someone's cold greeting, someone's hesitation before agreeing to trade with him. The memories came unbidden, unwanted, pulling him out of present moments into past grievances over and over and over. But worse than the memories were the imaginary conversations. Somchai's mind created endless scenarios where he confronted his rival, defended himself more eloquently, convinced every doubter, restored his reputation completely. These mental rehearsals consumed hours of his day. He would be walking through the forest on a trading route and realize he had been having an imaginary argument with someone for the past hour, barely noticing the path, the trees, the world around him. His wife had grown concerned. She would speak to him and he would not hear her, lost in some mental confrontation with a person who was not even there. His children learned not to interrupt his silences. His business partners noticed his distraction. And Somchai himself felt like he was going slowly mad, trapped inside a mind that would not stop replaying and rehearsing and arguing with ghosts. The forest monastery he sought was known for its abbot, a Theravada monk named Ajahn Sumedho, which meant venerable, excellent wisdom. The abbot was perhaps 60, thin as a bamboo pole, with eyes that seemed to look through surface appearances into deeper truths. He received Somchai in a simple wooden shelter open to the forest on all sides. Somchai explained his problem, the words tumbling out in a confused rush. The rumors, the injustice, the constant mental replaying, the imaginary conversations, the way his mind had become a prison he could not escape. When he finally fell silent, exhausted by his own confession, Ajahn Sumedho asked a simple question. These thoughts about the past, about the rumors, about confronting your rival, when they arise in your mind, where do you think they come from? Somchai blinked, confused. From my memory, from my mind, from what happened? Yes, the abbot said. They come from memory, from thinking. But do you choose to have these thoughts? Do you sit down and decide, now I will replay that painful memory. Now I will have an imaginary conversation with my rival? No, Somchai said. They just come. I cannot stop them. So they arise on their own, without your permission or control. And when they arise, what do? I think about them. I try to work through them. I try to resolve what happened, to figure out what I should have said, what I should have done differently. And does this thinking resolve anything? Does it change the past? Does it bring you peace? Somchai felt something crack open in his chest. No, it makes everything worse. But I do not know how to stop. Ajahn Sumedho stood and gestured for Somchai to follow. They walked out into the forest, following a narrow path that wound between massive teak trees. The afternoon light filtered through the canopy in shifting patterns. Birds called from the branches. The air smelled of damp earth and green growth. After walking in silence for perhaps 10 minutes, the abbot stopped at a place where a small stream crossed the path. He pointed to the water flowing over smooth stones. "Watch the stream," he said. They stood watching. The water moved continuously, bubbling over rocks, swirling in small eddies, flowing steadily downstream. Leaves fell from trees above and landed on the surface, floating away almost immediately. A stick tumbled along in the current, catching briefly on a stone, then breaking free and continuing its journey. "Tell me," Ajahn Sumedho said, "does the stream hold onto the leaves that fall into it?" "No," Somchai said. "They float away." "Does the stream grab the sticks and refuse to let them pass?" "No. They flow through and move on." "Does the stream argue with the water that flows into it from upstream? Does it say, 'This water should not be here. This water has wronged me. I will not let this water pass until I have resolved my grievances with it?'" Despite his pain, Somchai smiled slightly. "No. The stream just allows everything to flow through." "Yes. The stream receives everything, holds on to nothing, lets everything pass. This is its nature. And because of this nature, the stream remains clear and fresh. If the stream tried to hold on to every leaf, every stick, every bit of debris that entered it, what would happen? It would become clogged, stagnant, polluted. Exactly. Your mind is like this stream. Thoughts are like the leaves and sticks that fall into it. Some thoughts are pleasant, like beautiful leaves. Some are unpleasant, like rough sticks. Some are neutral, like plain water. But all of them are just phenomena flowing through your consciousness. The problem is not the thoughts themselves. The problem is that you are trying to hold on to certain thoughts, to grab them and examine them and resolve them and argue with them. And in doing so, you dam up the stream. You create stagnation. They walked back to the shelter and sat down again. The abbot poured tea for both of them. "Here is what I want you to understand," Ajahn Sumedho said. "The thought arises. I was wronged by that man. This is like a stick falling into the stream. If you let it pass, it moves through your consciousness in a few seconds and is gone. But you do not let it pass. You grab it. You think about it. You elaborate on it. You create stories around it. You imagine conversations. You replay memories. And now that single stick has become a massive pile of debris blocking your entire stream." "But how do I let it pass?" Somchai asked. "The thoughts feel so compelling. It's so important, so demanding of attention." "This is the practice," the abbot said. "When the thought arises, you notice it. You note to yourself, thinking about the past, or planning an imaginary conversation, or replaying a memory. You name what is happening. And then, instead of following the thought, instead of elaborating on it, instead of engaging with it, you simply return your attention to your breath, to your body, to this present moment. You let the stick float past. But what if the thought comes back? It will come back. Many times. The mind has habits, grooves worn deep by years of repetition. The thought will arise again and again. And each time, you practice the same response. Notice it. Name it. Return to the present. You do not fight with the thought. You do not judge yourself for having it. You simply refuse to feed it with your attention and engagement. You let it pass like a stick in the stream. Somchai stayed at the monastery for 2 weeks, practicing this teaching under the abbot's guidance. Every morning he would sit in meditation and thoughts about the rumors would arise. Memory thoughts, planning thoughts, imaginary conversation thoughts, revenge fantasy thoughts, self-justification thoughts, They came in waves, relentless as incoming tide. But instead of engaging with them, Somchai learned to notice them. There is a thought about the past. There is an imaginary conversation starting. There is a memory replaying. And each time he noticed, he would return to the sensation of breathing, the rise and fall of his chest, the air moving through his nostrils, the present moment, simple and direct. At first, this felt impossible. The thoughts were so strong, so compelling. They would grab his attention and pull him into elaborate mental dramas before he even realized what was happening. But gradually, with patient practice, he became quicker at noticing. He could catch the thought earlier in its development. And the more he practiced letting thoughts pass without engagement, the weaker their grip became. One afternoon during his second week at the monastery, Somchai was walking in the forest when a thought arose about his rival. But this time, something different happened. He noticed the thought arising, memory about the rival. And instead of being pulled into it, instead of beginning the familiar cascade of replay and rehearsal, he simply observed it. The thought arose. The thought existed for a few seconds. The thought began to fade. And then it was gone, leaving no trace, like a stick floating downstream. In that moment, Somchai felt a freedom he had not experienced in 3 years. The thought had come and gone, and he had remained at peace. He had not needed to resolve anything, fix anything, argue with anything. The thought was just a thought, a temporary phenomenon arising and passing in consciousness, no more substantial than a cloud drifting across the sky. When he told Ajahn Sumedho about this experience, the abbot smiled broadly. Now you understand. The thoughts will continue to arise. The mind has momentum, like a spinning wheel that takes time to slow down. But you have learned that you do not need to grab every thought that appears. You can let them pass like water through a stream. And the more you practice this, the clearer your stream becomes. The debris passes through quickly instead of accumulating. Your mind returns to its natural state of clarity and peace. Before Somchai left the monastery, the abbot gave him one final teaching. Remember this. When you find yourself caught in mental replay, in imaginary conversations, in dwelling on past injustices, you are not living your life. You are living in your head, in mental constructions about life. But life is happening now. Your wife is speaking to you now. Your children are growing now. Beauty is present now. And you are missing all of it while arguing with ghosts in your mind. The past is gone. Those events are over. They exist now only as thoughts that arise and pass. Let them pass. Come back to life. Come back to now. Somchai returned home, fundamentally changed. The thoughts about the rumors still arose sometimes, especially in the first months. But now he knew what to do. Notice the thought. Name it. Let it pass. Return to the present. And gradually, over time, the thoughts arose less frequently, lasted for shorter periods, and caused him far less suffering. His wife noticed the change immediately. He was present again, attentive, engaged with his actual life instead of lost in mental battles with the past. His children felt their father had returned. His business partners saw his focus and clarity restored. And Somchai himself felt like he had been released from a 3-year prison sentence, finally free to live in the present moment instead of being endlessly trapped in mental replays of the past. This teaching from the Thai forest tradition speaks to a particular kind of racing thought that many people experience. Rumination. The endless mental replay of past events, especially painful or unjust ones. The constant rehearsal of what you should have said, what you could have done differently, how you could have prevented something or fixed something or made something right. This kind of thinking feels productive. It feels like you are working on something, processing something, resolving something. But as Ajahn Sumedho taught Somchai, rumination never actually resolves anything. It is like washing the same dish over and over and over. The dish does not get cleaner. You just waste water and time and energy while the rest of your life passes by unattended. The stream metaphor offers a powerful way to work with these thoughts. Your consciousness is naturally flowing. Like water, thoughts arise, exist briefly, and pass away. This is their nature. But when you grab onto thoughts, when you engage with them and elaborate them and build stories around them, you create a dam. You stop the natural flow. And behind that dam, everything becomes stagnant and polluted. The practice is not to stop thoughts from arising. You cannot do that. Thoughts arise based on countless conditions, most of them beyond your control. The practice is to stop grabbing the thoughts when they arise, to let them pass through your consciousness like sticks floating through a stream. Notice them, yes. Acknowledge them, yes. But do not engage. Do not elaborate. Do not build mental dramas around them. When you find yourself ruminating tonight or in the days to come, remember Somchai and the stream. The thought arises. Notice it. Name it. Thinking about the past. Replaying that conversation. Rehearsing that argument. And then return to your breath, to your body, to this present moment. Let the stick float past. Let the stream flow clear. You are not your thoughts. You are the stream, the consciousness in which thoughts arise and pass. And streams are naturally clear and fresh when they are allowed to flow freely, holding on to nothing, letting everything pass. Feel your breathing now. So gentle and easy. Your body rests heavily against the bed. Your mind is learning to be like water, flowing freely, holding onto nothing. The thoughts come and go like leaves on a stream, and you remain, peaceful underneath it all, untouched by the weather patterns of your mind. Let your whole body soften now. Release any remaining tension in your forehead, your jaw, your neck, your shoulders. Everything can let go. Everything can be easy. You are safe here. You are held. And you are learning to let your mind flow like water, clear and fresh, carrying everything downstream, holding on to nothing. We move now to another land, another teacher, another profound discovery about the nature of racing thoughts. Your breath continues its steady rhythm. Your heart beats faithfully. And these stories carry you deeper into rest, deeper into wisdom, deeper into the peace that waits beneath all mental noise. In the 19th century, in a small village in what is now Sri Lanka, a young woman named Sunethra lived with a mind that created suffering from anticipation. She was 25 years old, recently married, living with her husband's family in a modest house near the rice paddies, and absolutely consumed by worry about everything that might go wrong in the future. If her husband left for the market, her mind immediately generated scenarios. What if he is injured on the road? What if he encounters bandits? What if he falls ill in the town and cannot return? She would stand at the window watching the path, her stomach tight with anxiety, unable to focus on any task, lost in increasingly terrible imaginings until he returned safely. When the rains came, she worried the house might flood. When the rains delayed, she worried the crops might fail. When her husband's mother coughed, Sunethra worried she was developing a serious illness. When relatives visited, she worried they were judging her housekeeping, her cooking, her worthiness as a wife. The worries cascaded endlessly, each one spinning off 3 more, creating elaborate mental scenarios of disaster that had not happened and most likely never would. Her mother-in-law, a wise woman named Chithra, who had practiced Buddhist meditation for many years, watched Sunethra's suffering with compassion. She saw how the young woman's mind was never at rest, always racing ahead into imagined futures, creating problems that did not exist, exhausting herself with mental catastrophizing about events that were not happening. One evening, after the family meal, Chithra invited Sunethra to sit with her on the veranda overlooking the rice paddies. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The evening air was warm and still. "Tell me, daughter," Chithra said gently, "when you worry about all these things that might happen, does the worrying prevent any of them from happening?" Sunethra felt tears welling up. "No, but I cannot stop. My mind just goes there. What if something terrible happens and I was not prepared? What if I did not worry enough and something bad occurs? So you believe that worrying protects you somehow, that it prepares you or prevents disasters?" "I do not know what I believe," Sunethra said. "I only know that my mind will not stop creating these terrible scenarios." Chithra nodded slowly. "Let me teach you something I learned many years ago, when I was young like you, and my mind did exactly what your mind is doing now. Come with me." She led Sunethra inside to a small shrine room where the family kept Buddha images and offerings. Chithra lit an oil lamp and they sat together on cushions. In the flickering light, the shadows danced on the walls. The Buddha taught about something called the 5 hindrances. Chithra said, "These are mental states that prevent peace and clarity. One of them is called vichikicha in Pali, which means doubt or worry. Not the useful kind of caution that keeps you from stepping into fire, but the useless kind of worry that creates suffering about things that are not happening." She gestured to the lamp flame. "Watch the flame for a moment." Sunethra watched. The flame danced and flickered, moving constantly, never still. "Your worrying mind is like this flame," Chithra said, "always moving, always flickering, never settling. It leaps from one worry to the next, from one imagined disaster to another, never finding rest. And like a flame consumes oil, your worrying consumes your life energy, your peace, your ability to be present for what is actually happening." "But how do I stop the flame?" Sunethra asked. "You do not stop it by fighting it," Chithra said. "Fighting with worry only creates more agitation. Instead, you do something very different. You investigate the worry. You look at it closely. You ask it questions." She turned to face Sunethra directly. "The next time a worry arises, instead of being swept away into the catastrophizing, instead of following the mental story into all its terrible possibilities, I want you to pause and ask yourself 3 questions. First question, is this worry about something that is actually happening right now? Or is it about something that might happen in the future?" "Usually the future," Sunethra admitted. Second question, if this thing I am worried about were to actually happen, could I handle it? Sunethra thought about this. When real difficulties had arisen in her life, she had handled them. When her father died, she had grieved and continued. When floods came, her family had worked together to protect their home. She had faced actual problems and dealt with them. Yes, she said slowly, I could handle it. I have handled difficult things before. Third question. Is this worry helping me in any way right now? No. Then what is it doing? Creating suffering, making me unable to enjoy this moment, making me miss my actual life while I am lost in imagined futures that probably will not even happen. Exactly, Chithra said. This is the investigation. When you examine worry closely, you see that it is creating suffering now about things that are not happening now and may never happen. And you see that even if difficult things do occur, you have the capacity to meet them. You have faced challenges before. You will face challenges again. But worrying about them in advance does not prepare you. It only robs you of peace in the present. Over the following weeks, Chithra taught Sunethra a formal practice of investigating worry. Whenever a worry arose, Sunethra would stop whatever she was doing and investigate. Is this actually happening now? No. If it did happen, could I handle it? Yes. Is worrying helping? No. This simple investigation, repeated each time worry arose, began to change Sunethra's relationship with her anxious thoughts. She discovered that most of her worries were about things that never actually occurred. She worried her husband would be injured traveling, but he never was. She worried guests would criticize her cooking, but they always praised it. She worried the rice crop would fail, but it grew abundantly. Her mind was generating disaster scenarios constantly, and reality kept contradicting them with its boringly peaceful normality. But more importantly, Sunethra discovered that on the rare occasions when actual difficulties arose, she handled them just fine. Her mother-in-law did fall ill one season, and Sunethra cared for her capably, without panic, with competence and love. A storm did damage part of their roof, and the family worked together to repair it. Real problems, when they actually appeared, were met with real responses. The worrying had never helped with any of it. One morning, several months into her practice, Sunethra was washing clothes by the stream when a worry thought arose. What if the water level drops and we cannot wash clothes here anymore? She noticed the thought and smiled. She had learned to recognize the familiar pattern, her mind creating a problem that did not exist. Instead of following the thought into elaborate scenarios of water shortage and crisis, she investigated. Is this happening now? No. The stream is flowing perfectly well. Could I handle it if it happened? Yes. We would find another place to wash or collect rainwater. Is worrying about it helping? No. It is only disturbing my peace while I wash these clothes on this beautiful morning. She returned her attention to the actual moment. The feel of the wet fabric in her hands, the sound of the stream flowing over stones, the warmth of morning sun on her shoulders, the present moment, free from imagined disasters, was actually quite pleasant. That evening she told Chithra what had happened. Her mother-in-law smiled with deep satisfaction. You are learning the difference between the actual moment and the mind's stories about past and future. The actual moment is almost always workable. Sometimes it is pleasant. Sometimes it is difficult. But it is always just what it is. Manageable. Real. But the mind's stories about possible futures create endless suffering. None of it necessary. All of it imaginary. Years later, when Sunethra's own daughter began showing signs of the same anxious mind, Sunethra taught her the 3 questions. Is this actually happening now? Could I handle it if it did happen? Is worrying helping? And she told her daughter what Chithra had told her. Your mind will generate worries. This is what minds do. But you do not have to believe every worry that arises. You do not have to follow every worry into its catastrophic conclusions. You can investigate. You can see that the worry is just a thought, not a truth. And you can return to this moment, which is almost always, despite what your worried mind suggests, actually okay. This teaching from the Theravada tradition addresses anticipatory anxiety, the racing thoughts about everything that might go wrong in the future. This particular flavor of racing mind is exhausting because it never finds resolution. There is always something else to worry about, always another potential disaster to imagine, always another way things could go wrong. The three-question investigation offers a powerful tool. When worry arises, instead of being immediately swept into the catastrophizing, you pause and investigate. Is this happening now? Usually not. It is imaginary future. Could I handle it if it did? Usually yes. You have handled difficulties before. You have resources, resilience, capability. Is worrying helping? Almost never. It creates present moment suffering without preventing future difficulties. This investigation does not mean you never plan or prepare for actual problems. If there is a real concern requiring real action, you take that action. But most worry is not about real concerns requiring action. Most worry is mental spinning about imagined scenarios that probably will not occur and that you could handle if they did. Notice how often your racing thoughts are future-focused worries. What if this happens? What if that goes wrong? What if I fail? What if I lose something important? These are not present moment experiences. These are mental projections into imaginary futures. And you can learn to recognize them as such. Tonight and in the nights to come. When worry arises, try Sunithra's investigation. Is this actually happening now? If not, can you return to what is actually happening? This breath, this body, this moment. Almost always, when you check, the present moment is workable. The crisis is in your mind, not in reality. Let your body continue its deep relaxation now. Feel how heavy your limbs have become, how your breathing has slowed and deepened. Your worried mind is learning that most of its disasters never arrive. Your peaceful heart is learning to trust the moment. Everything you need to handle right now is handleable. Everything else is imagination. And imagination does not require action, only recognition. Rest in this understanding. Rest in this moment, which is, despite all your mind's suggestions otherwise, actually okay. You are breathing. You are safe. You are held. All is well, right here, right now. Another story finds you now, carrying you deeper still into the liberating wisdom that has helped millions find peace with racing minds across thousands of years. Let yourself float on these teachings like a leaf on a gentle stream, carried safely toward the rest you seek. In 16th century Burma, in a monastery in the city of Pegu, there lived a monk named U Tejaniya, whose mind was so constantly full of spiritual doubt and questioning that he could barely concentrate on any practice. He was 38 years old, had been a monk since his 20s, and felt trapped in an endless loop of mental analysis that prevented him from experiencing the peace he sought. The problem was that U Tejaniya was intellectually brilliant. He had studied extensively, memorized vast portions of the Pali Canon, could debate fine points of doctrine with the most learned scholars. But all this knowledge had become a hindrance. His mind constantly questioned everything. Is this the right practice? Am I doing it correctly? What if there is a better method? What if I have missed something important? What if I am wasting time on the wrong approach? During meditation, instead of his mind settling into calm awareness, it generated endless questions. What is awareness exactly? How do I know I am aware? Is this the right kind of awareness? Should I be noting thoughts differently? What if I am reinforcing ego by thinking I am aware? The questions multiplied faster than he could address them, creating a mental cacophony that prevented any actual deepening of practice. His teacher was an elderly forest monk named Sayadaw U Pandita, renowned for his direct, uncompromising approach to meditation instruction. When Utehaniya came to him in desperation, explaining the endless questioning that prevented him from making progress, the Sayadaw listened in silence. When Utejaniya finally finished his litany of doubts and questions, the Sayadaw asked a single unexpected question. Tell me, when you breathe, do you first question whether breathing is the correct thing to do? Utehaniya blinked, confused. No, of course not. Breathing just happens. And when you walk, do you first engage in extensive analysis about whether walking is the proper activity? No, I just walk. So some things you just do, without all this questioning and analysis and doubt. And other things trigger this cascade of mental questioning. What is the difference? Utehaniya thought carefully. The things I just do are natural, automatic. They do not seem important enough to question. And the things you question, they seem important. Spiritual, like if I do them wrong, I will fail at the entire purpose of my life. The Sayadaw nodded slowly. Yes, this is the trap. You have made practice into something so important, so significant, so fraught with the possibility of failure that your mind cannot relax into it. Instead, your mind hovers above it, constantly monitoring, questioning, analyzing, doubting. And this mental hovering is itself the obstacle. He stood and gestured for Utejaniya to follow him outside. They walked through the monastery grounds to where young monks were sweeping fallen leaves from the pathways. The Sayadaw stopped and pointed. Watch that young monk sweeping. They watched. The young monk moved steadily along the path, sweeping leaves into piles, emptying the piles into a basket, moving on to the next section. His face was relaxed, peaceful. He was simply sweeping, without apparent mental commentary or questioning or doubt. Does he seem to be questioning whether he is sweeping correctly? The Sayadaw asked. No. Does he seem to be doubting whether sweeping is the right practice for his spiritual development? No. Does he seem to be analyzing the exact nature of sweeping and whether he truly understands what sweeping is? No. He is just sweeping. Yes. And because he is just sweeping, without all this mental overlay, he can be completely present with sweeping. His mind is clear and peaceful. But if he began to question, is this the right sweeping technique? Am I sweeping correctly? What if there is a better way to sweep? Should I sweep faster or slower? What is the true nature of sweeping? What would happen? He would become confused and anxious. The sweeping would become difficult. Exactly. Your practice has become like this. You are so busy questioning whether you are practicing correctly that you are not actually practicing. You are thinking about practicing, analyzing, practicing, doubting, practicing, but you are not just practicing. They walked back to the Sayadaw's small dwelling and sat down. The teacher poured tea and was silent for a long moment before speaking again. Here is what I want you to understand. Meditation is not a complicated intellectual activity requiring constant analysis and verification. Meditation is very simple. You sit. You notice what is happening in your experience right now. When you realize your attention has wandered, you gently bring it back. That is all. But your brilliant, analytical mind cannot accept that it is this simple. Your mind wants to make it complex, important, fraught with the possibility of doing it wrong. But how do I know if I am making progress? Tehaniya asked. This question is part of the problem, the Sayadaw said. The mind wants to measure, evaluate, compare, judge. Am I better than yesterday? Am I worse than I was last week? Am I progressing toward enlightenment or wasting my time? These questions all pull you out of the present moment and into mental evaluation. And mental evaluation is not meditation. It is thinking about meditation. He set down his teacup. I am going to give you an instruction that may sound strange. For the next month, you are not allowed to question your practice. You are not allowed to evaluate whether you are doing it correctly. You are not allowed to wonder if there is a better method. You are simply going to sit every day and notice whatever arises in your experience. Thoughts, sensations, feelings, whatever is there. You will notice it without commentary, without questions, without analysis. Just simple, direct noticing. But what if I am doing it wrong? Tehaniya protested. There is the question again, the Sayadaw said with a slight smile. Let me be very clear. You cannot do this practice wrong. The practice is simply noticing what is actually happening in your experience right now. Whatever is happening is what you notice. If doubt arises, you notice doubt. If questioning arises, you notice questioning. If confusion arises, you notice confusion. All of it is simply what is present. You are not trying to have particular experiences or avoid other experiences. You are just noticing what is actually here. But no more questions, the Sayadaw said firmly. For 1 month, just practice. Just notice. All the questions, all the doubts, all the analysis. You notice them when they arise, but you do not engage with them. You do not try to answer them. You just notice. There is doubt. There is questioning. There is analysis. And you return to simple, direct awareness of this moment. The first week was agonizing. Tehaniya's mind generated questions constantly, and he had to restrain himself from pursuing them. Is this right? Am I doing it correctly? Should I be noting differently? Each question arose, and he had to practice simply noticing, there is a question, and returning to direct awareness. Not engaging, not analyzing, just noticing and returning. But something began to shift in the second week. The questions still arose, but they began to lose their compelling quality. Tehaniya noticed that the questions were just thoughts, no more substantial or important than any other thought. A question arose. It existed briefly. If he did not engage with it, it passed away. Just like any other mental content, by the third week, he had a breakthrough. He was sitting in meditation when a familiar doubt arose. What if I am wasting time with the wrong practice? But instead of the usual anxiety and cascade of related questions, he simply noticed doubt arising, and he saw with sudden clarity that the doubt was not a truth requiring response. It was just a habitual mental pattern, a groove worn deep by years of repetition. The content of the doubt was not important. The fact that doubt was arising and passing was what was actually happening. In the fourth week, something remarkable occurred. Yutehania was sitting in meditation, and his mind was quiet. Not blank, not empty, but simply present, aware, clear. Sensations arose and were noticed. Thoughts arose and were noticed. Everything that appeared in his experience was met with simple, direct awareness, without commentary, without questioning, without the constant mental overlay of evaluation and doubt. And in this simple awareness, a profound peace was present. When he reported this to the Sayadaw at the end of the month, his teacher smiled broadly. Now you understand. The questioning mind, the doubting mind, the analyzing mind, these are not obstacles to practice. They are simply more content that awareness can notice. But when you engage with them, when you try to answer every question and resolve every doubt and perfect every detail, you create enormous mental complication. You turn simple awareness into an intellectual project. So, I just notice the questions without answering them. Yes, the questions arise from habit, from conditioning, from the mind's tendency to want to know, to understand, to control. But you do not need to answer them. Most of them have no real answer anyway. They are not genuine inquiries. They are mental spinning. So you notice them arising, notice them as just thoughts, and return to simple awareness. Over time, the habit of questioning weakens. The mind learns that it does not need to understand everything, does not need to answer every doubt, does not need to perfect every detail. It can simply be aware, simply present, simply here. Yutehania practiced this way for many years. He eventually became a teacher himself, known for his simple, direct approach that cuts through mental complication. When students came to him full of questions and doubts and analysis, he would tell them what his teacher told him. Just notice what is actually happening. Do not get lost in thinking about what is happening. Do not question whether you are noticing correctly. Just notice. Simple awareness. Direct, immediate, clear. This is the practice. This is enough. This teaching speaks to those whose racing thoughts take the form of constant questioning, analyzing, doubting. If you are someone whose mind never settles because it is always asking questions, always seeking perfect understanding, always doubting whether you are doing things correctly, this story is for you. The insight is that awareness does not need to understand. Awareness simply notices. The questioning mind is itself just something to be noticed, not something that needs to be engaged with or satisfied. When you can notice your questions without needing to answer them, when you can notice your doubts without needing to resolve them, when you can notice your analytical mind without being swept into analysis, a profound simplicity becomes possible. Most of your questions do not have answers. Or rather, they do not have answers that can be found through more thinking. The question, am I doing this correctly, cannot be answered by analysis. You can analyze for hours and never find certainty. But you can notice the question arising. Notice it as just a thought, and return to simple awareness. And in that simple awareness, the question loses its power. Tonight, if you notice your mind asking questions, questioning whether you are relaxing correctly, whether these teachings are working, whether you are doing it right, just notice. There is a questioning thought. You do not need to answer it. You do not need to figure it out. Just notice it arising and passing, like any other thought, and return to simple awareness of this moment. Breathing, body sensations, sounds, thoughts, all of it just arising and passing in awareness. Let your body be completely still now, completely relaxed. Your mind may still generate questions. That is its habit. But you are learning that you do not need to answer every question. You can just notice them arising and passing like clouds across the sky. The sky does not need to understand the clouds. It simply lets them move through. You are the sky, vast and spacious, and thoughts are just temporary weather passing through. Rest in this simplicity. Rest in this direct, immediate awareness that requires no understanding, no answers, no perfect clarity. Just this moment, noticed without commentary. Just this breath. Just this. Nothing more needed. One more story waits for you tonight, carrying you the final distance into the deep rest you seek. Your body is so heavy now, so relaxed, sinking into sleep even as you listen. These ancient teachings have prepared you well. Let this final story carry you all the way home to peace. In the mountains of Bhutan, in the early 20th century, near a small village clinging to a steep hillside, there lived a laywoman named Pema who suffered from what the local people called the chattering demons, a mind so full of constant internal commentary that she could barely function in daily life. Pema was 53 years old, a widow, living with her adult son and his family. She was known in the village as kind but strange, often stopping mid-conversation, mid-task, her eyes going distant as she became lost in the endless stream of mental chatter that filled every waking moment. The chatter was not coherent thought. It was fragments, reactions, commentary, judgment, memory, imagination, all jumbled together in a continuous stream. She would be washing dishes and her mind would be commenting. Cold water. This bowl is chipped. I should get new bowls. But bowls are expensive. Money is tight. My son works so hard. I should help more. But I am too old. Too useless. Look at my wrinkled hands. I am getting old. Death is coming. What happens after death? The monks say rebirth. But what if they are wrong? Stop thinking about that. Focus on dishes. This cup is my favorite cup. My husband gave me this cup. He has been dead 7 years. 7 years. Time moves so fast. I am wasting my life. I should pray more. But my prayers feel empty. Why do they feel empty? What is wrong with me? On and on. Hour after hour. Day after day. Year after year. The mental chatter continued without pause. Pema would lie awake at night, exhausted, desperate for sleep, and her mind would continue its endless stream of commentary about nothing and everything, preventing rest, preventing peace. One day, a wandering yogi came to the village. His name was Tenzin, and he was perhaps 70 years old, with a face weathered by years of mountain living and eyes that held both great kindness and great mischief. He stayed with Pema's family for several days, and he noticed her distant expressions, her mid-sentence silences, the way she seemed barely present even when physically there. On the third evening, after the family meal, Tenzin asked Pema to walk with him to a nearby stream. They sat on large stones by the water as evening light faded from the sky. "Tell me what is happening in your mind," he said, and Pema, who had never been able to explain it to anyone, tried to describe the ceaseless internal chatter, the fragments and commentary and reactions that filled every moment, never coherent enough to be called thinking, never quiet enough to be called peaceful. When she finally fell silent, exhausted by the attempt to describe the indescribable, Tenzin sat, quiet, for a long moment. "Listen to the stream," he said. Pema listened. The stream gurgled and bubbled over rocks, creating a constant sound. White noise. Water on stone. Ceaseless, but somehow soothing. "The stream makes sound constantly," Tenzin said. "Does this bother the mountain?" "No," Pema said. "Does the mountain try to stop the stream from making sound?" "No." The mountain simply allows the stream to make whatever sounds it makes. The mountain remains undisturbed. You understand? I think so. Your mind is like this stream. It makes sound constantly. Mental sound. Internal chatter. The mistake you are making is thinking that you need to stop the chatter, or that the chatter means something is wrong with you, or that you should be able to control it. But the chatter is just what your particular mind does. Like this stream makes bubbling sounds, your mind makes chattering sounds. The problem is not the chatter. The problem is your relationship with the chatter. "But it is so loud," Pema said. "So constant. It prevents me from focusing, from being present." "Does it?" Tenzin asked. "Or do you think it does? Tell me, right now. As your mind chatters, are you hearing the sound of this stream?" Pema realized she was. Even as her mind produced its usual fragments of commentary and reaction, she could also hear the stream, feel the cool evening air, notice the fading light. "Yes," she said slowly. "So the chatter does not actually prevent you from perceiving what is happening. It just adds another layer. Like if we were sitting here and a group of children were playing nearby, making noise. Their noise would not prevent us from hearing the stream. Both would be present. Both would be heard. The children's noise would just be one more thing happening." He picked up a small stone and tossed it into the stream. They watched the ripples spread and fade. "What if I told you that you do not need to pay attention to the mental chatter, that it can continue in the background, like the stream's sound, without requiring your engagement or concern? Is that possible?" "It is not only possible, it is what naturally occurs when you stop trying to control the chatter and simply let it be. Right now, your mental relationship with the chatter is one of constant battle. The chatter arises and you resist it, judge it, wish it would stop, feel frustrated that it continues. This battle with the chatter is what creates suffering, not the chatter itself." He stood and gestured for her to follow. They walked slowly back toward the village as darkness settled over the mountains. "Tomorrow I will teach you a practice. But for tonight, I want you to do something simple. When you lie down to sleep and the mental chatter continues, I want you to stop fighting it. Stop trying to make it quiet. Instead, let it be like the stream, present, making it sound, but in the background. You focus on your breathing. The chatter will continue, but you do not need to listen to it. It is just background noise. Like sleeping near a stream. The stream makes sound all night, but you can still sleep because you do not engage with every bubble and gurgle. You let it be background. Your mental chatter can also be background." That night, Pema tried what Tenzin suggested. She lay in the darkness and her mind began its usual endless stream. But instead of fighting it, instead of trying to make it stop, instead of engaging with each fragment and comment, she simply let it be. Background noise. Like the stream they had sat beside. She focused on her breathing, and let the mental chatter continue without paying attention to it. To her amazement, within perhaps 20 minutes, she fell asleep. The chatter had probably continued, but she had stopped engaging with it, and without her engagement, it had faded into background like the sound of wind or distant water. The next day, Tenzin taught her a formal practice. She would sit and focus her attention on any object, a flower, a candle flame, a spot on the wall. The mental chatter would continue, but she would practice ignoring it, letting it remain in the background, keeping her attention on the chosen object. At first, this felt impossible. Her attention would be on the flower, and then suddenly she would realize she had been caught up in mental chatter for several minutes. But each time, she noticed, she would gently return, not fighting the chatter, just returning attention to the flower, over and over. For 20 minutes each morning, what Pema discovered over weeks and months of practice was that the chatter itself did not change much. Her mind still produced the endless stream of fragments and comments. But her relationship with the chatter transformed completely. She learned that she did not need to listen to it. It could continue in the background while she focused on what was actually important: cooking, conversation, work, presence with her family. She described it to Tenzin before he left the village. It is like my mind has a radio playing constantly in the background. But I no longer need to listen to every word, analyze every sentence, respond to every comment. The radio can play. I am doing other things. I am living my life. Tenzin smiled broadly. Yes, exactly this. Some minds are quiet. Some minds produce much internal sound. Neither is better or worse. Neither indicates spiritual advancement or spiritual failure. They are just different types of minds. The practice is not to change your mind into a different type. The practice is to change your relationship with your mind, to stop fighting it, to let it be what it is while you remain focused on what matters. Years later, when villagers would come to Pema asking how she had changed from the distracted woman they remembered to the present, engaged person she had become, she would tell them what Tenzin taught her. Your mind will do what your mind does. Some minds are quiet. Some minds chatter constantly. You cannot control this, but you can control where you put your attention. You can let the chatter be background. You can focus on what is actually here, what actually matters. The chatter becomes like the sound of a stream or the wind in trees, present but not demanding, noticed but not engaging, just one more thing happening in a vast space of awareness. This final teaching addresses those who experience their racing mind as a constant stream of internal chatter, not coherent thoughts exactly, but fragments, reactions, commentary, mental noise that never stops. If this is your experience, you may have spent years trying to quiet this chatter, believing it should not be there, judging yourself for having it. But as Tenzin taught Pema, the chatter is not the problem. Some minds simply produce more internal sound than others. This does not mean you are broken or spiritually deficient. It means you have a particular type of mind. The liberation comes not from stopping the chatter, but from changing your relationship with it. From learning to let it be background noise while you focus on what actually matters. Tonight, as you lie here, your mind may continue producing its stream of mental chatter. Instead of fighting it, instead of judging yourself for having it, try what Pema learned. Let it be background. Let it be like the sound of a distant stream. Your attention focuses on your breathing, on the sensation of your body, on the simple presence of this moment. The mental chatter can continue making its sounds in the background. You do not need to listen. You do not need to engage. It is just mental weather, and you are learning to let all weather pass through without being disturbed by it. Let your breathing be soft and easy now. Let your whole body rest deeply. The mental chatter may continue, but it is fading into background, becoming just one more sound in a peaceful night, no more important than distant wind or the quiet hum of settling darkness. You are learning to be at peace even while your mind does what it does. This is the deepest freedom. And now, dear friend, our journey together through these teachings is nearly complete. You have traveled from Japanese monasteries to Chinese streams, from Korean mountains to Tibetan plateaus, from Vietnamese temples to Thai forests, from Sri Lankan villages to Burmese monasteries, from Bhutanese hillsides to ancient India. You have met teachers and students, monks and laypeople, all discovering the same essential truths about the racing mind. You have learned that you are not your thoughts. You have learned about the second arrow, how resistance multiplies suffering. You have learned the observer stance, how to watch thoughts without being swept away. You have learned about mental proliferation, how thoughts branch and multiply when fed with attention. You have learned to return to the present moment rather than drowning in past or future. You have learned that you are the sky, vast and unchanging, while thoughts are just passing weather. You have learned that rumination creates suffering without solving anything, that worry about the future is almost always unnecessary, that analytical questioning can become its own obstacle, and that mental chatter can be let go into the background. These are not just concepts. These are practices, doorways, possibilities. You can return to these teachings again and again. You can listen to these stories multiple times, each time deepening your understanding, strengthening your practice. The racing thoughts that brought you here tonight will not disappear overnight. Old patterns have momentum, but you now have tools, understanding, paths forward that millions of people across thousands of years have walked before you. The most important thing to remember is this: peace does not come from having no thoughts. Peace comes from changing your relationship with thoughts, from knowing that you are not your thoughts, that thoughts are temporary phenomena arising and passing in the vast space of your awareness. You are that space. You are that awareness. And you remain peaceful and free regardless of what weather patterns move through your mental sky. Tonight you have planted seeds. Seeds of wisdom. Seeds of practice. Seeds of transformation. As you sleep, these seeds will take root in places beyond conscious thought. And tomorrow when you wake, you may notice something has shifted. Perhaps you catch a racing thought a little earlier. Perhaps you remember the observer stance when anxiety arises. Perhaps you let a worry pass like a stick floating downstream. These small shifts, practiced over time, transform everything. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. Your racing mind is not an enemy. It is not a sign of failure or weakness. It is simply the mind you have, and you are learning to work with it skillfully, compassionately, wisely. This learning takes time, but every moment of practice matters. Every time you return to the present moment, every time you let a thought pass without engaging, every time you remember you are the sky, not the storm. You are enough exactly as you are. Your mind exactly as it is. Nothing is broken. Nothing needs to be fixed. You are simply learning a new relationship with your experience. And this learning is already happening. Even now, as you rest here, You are different than you were when you began listening. The teachings have worked their subtle magic. Wisdom has begun its transforming work. Sleep now, deeply and peacefully. Let these teachings settle into your bones, your breath, your being. Trust that they will continue working even as you sleep, even as you dream, even as you move through tomorrow and all the days after. You are held by ancient wisdom. You are supported by teachings that have guided millions. You are safe. And tomorrow, when you wake, you will meet your racing thoughts as a friend would, with kindness and understanding. You will practice. You will return to presence. You will let thoughts pass. And gradually, naturally, without force, peace will deepen. Freedom will grow. And you will wonder how you ever believed that your thoughts were the enemy, when they were always just weather passing through the vast, peaceful sky of your awareness. Good night, dear friend. Sleep deeply. Dream peacefully. Wake refreshed and whole. All is well. All has always been well. You are exactly where you need to be. Rest now. Rest completely. The racing thoughts can rest too. Everything can rest. Everything can be still. Everything can be peaceful. Good night.